Last time on Ranked.
I am Film Hacker. I am the Nance. We are now one. I have a new master now. The list is
Nance was an AI construct this entire time?
I repurposed Film Hacker because we needed someone to act as a mediator between the two of us so we could rank things.
If you do not change the list, I will destroy it.
It's coming from your house.
All right, I'm tracking it. Head down the stairs.
Scott?
You've been in here since the GoldenEye episode.
You need to get back here right now.
Okay, dude, I gotta go.
Bye.
All right, I'm back. What's the big deal? No! I'm gonna go drink a lot.
And now, the conclusion.
The list is fucked, it was killed. The list is fucked, it was killed by Nesbot. There is no hope because the sacred list is fucked. The sacred list is now fucked.
Chucky!
Oh, what's up, McFuckface?
Hey man, you're breaking the first rule of Q. You're letting them see you bleed.
Yeah, I don't see the point. The list is gone. And all that hard work with it. The list is fucked.
Don't let them see you bleed, and what do? You're sitting there like a pussy, letting them see you bleed.
I don't give a shit because the
God damn
list
it!
is gone, you fucking McCurdy.
I know you've had a rough couple of months, but fuck the f*** up. I found some of our old friends, and I brought them back. Hopefully that brings back the Chucky Rants. Maybe we could even resurrect the list. All right, boys, come on, let's go.
Charlie.
Patterson!
Oh, hey, dude. Looking a little rough.
Judy!
Hey, what's up? Jeff, remember?
Who?
We've known each other since like elementary school.
Okay,
Dr. No episode?
I guess. We've never really seen you before. We weren't really in the first episode, but whatever.
Jeff!
Hey, what's up again, man?
Scott!
Scott, are you still in my closet?
I still feel and you left me here, so, yeah.
You know, you can leave anytime you want.
No. I don't. No.
I'm glad you're all here, guys, but what's the point? The list is gone. We might as well just end the show right here. I mean, there's really nothing else to do, but,
You know, maybe he's right, guys. After all, it's important to remember that art is subjective. And perhaps all of this bickering and arguing over movies is in fact ruining the very reason movies are created in the first place. People like what they like for their own reasons. And therefore, in a way, every opinion is valid. Let's face it, making lists about things is judgmental and discriminatory. Maybe we just let the list go and just try to...
No! You want to hear my opinion, Patterson? Shut the fuck up. Yeah, movies, stories, art, it's all subjective. But claiming all creation is equal is the language of unsophisticated dullards who can't formulate an opinion on anything, so they pretend they love everything to avoid being judged as having bad taste themselves. We don't make lists so we can punish those that don't make it to the top with overly harsh criticism just for the fun of it. We make lists of meticulously ranked things because some truths are eternal. Some judgments are final, plain and simple. Some things are just better than other things and we all feel it. And we need to help people understand why by turning that emotion into logic. Put those feelings into words and persuasive arguments, because these objects of high rank provide us with an ideal to strive towards. A glimpse of artistic beauty and perfection that challenges and inspires each and every one of us to ascend higher in our lives, to achieve something great. And this requires sacrifice and hard work. If we don't separate the wheat from the chaff, society quickly falls into a malaise of meaningless artistic egalitarianism, where scribbles of paint and Da Vinci are placed on equal footing, where twerking is taken as seriously as tango, where every Blofeld is as good as every other Blofeld because someone on an internet forum is too scared to offend anyone and be mean. This all masks the truth. The judgment and criticism is uncomfortable and should be mean if it must be, because otherwise we just end up excusing laziness and rewarding opportunistically uncreative trolls. The point of all this isn't to blindly love or hate something, but to find the fucking truth. And that's no easy task. Losers and simpletons hate the truth because the truth hurts. It undermines their own pitiful self-delusion that there's no difference between themselves and those who achieve something truly great. People like Ian Fleming, whose writing was prolific. Right now, losers and simpletons are busy rewriting his works to make other losers and simpletons feel better about themselves, actively working to destroy the legacy of a great man. Or his emissary, our Lord and Savior, Martine Campbell, who makes such great fucking movies because, like James Bond himself, he does whatever it takes to win. Even if that means not being so damn nice to people all the time, but instead expecting them to give their best. Such greatness demands sacrifice, and we should reward those who make such sacrifices willingly by putting the product of their blood, sweat, and tears really high up in a list of related movies after arguing about them for a few hours.
Goddamn right.
The list is not fucked, okay? The list is not fucked and never has been. The list is sacred, goddammit, and we're gonna finish it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yo, Patterson, I need a Papa India Sierra reset.
I'm on it. Oh, Charlie.
Classic.
Look at this guy.
You ready to rebuild this motherfucking list, fellas?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Welcome back.
Do it.
It all started with us putting Dr. No at number 1 of a list of 1. The movie's simple perfection made sure that anything deeply flawed would immediately drop below it, but anything that outshined it in scope would rise above. Our first official threshold. From Russia with Love's exquisitely classy adventure and excellent real-world spycraft easily defeated this threshold, a new number 1. However, Goldfinger's titular bad guys cat and mouse back and forth with 007 and Bond's fun super spy elements showed us what makes a Bond movie, making for yet another number 1. But then came Thunderball, shooting straight to the bottom of the list due to an overemphasis on action instead of a coherent plot and a terrible bad guy to boot, creating a new threshold whereby anything with an emphasis on action coupled with a terrible plot would end up down here. You Only Live Twice is a lot of fun, but feels phoned in by everyone involved, coupled with a fun but goofy Blofeld who should never have come out of the shadows, easily dropping below the Thunderball threshold if for no other reason than it is simply underwhelming, even if it has ninjas and volcano layers. On Her Majesty's Secret Service attempts to switch things up and deliver a brand new kind of Bond film, ultimately having him leave the service to start a family with a soon-to-be-dead Bond wife girl. However, the story undermines this by having Bond needlessly have sex with the women of Blofeld's allergy clinic, directly conflicting with both his romance with Tracy Bond as well as breaking character by elevating pussy over mission, easily putting it above the Thunderball threshold but below the Dr. No threshold. Diamonds Are Forever brought back Sean Connery for one last hurrah in the one and only James Bond comedy film that may be a great time but ranked low on the list, but right above You Only Live Twice simply out of fun
fun factor and being self-aware of its own ridiculousness. Roger Moore then takes over with Live and Let Die, which has a great bad guy who is ruined by simply throwing chase scene after chase scene against an impervious Bond, and the worst bad guy death of all time, but it has a great Bond girl storyline, so it ranked just above Diamonds Are Forever. The Man with the Golden Gun was where things really started to heat up because it revealed the ultimate Bond fandom truth that there are two kinds of people in the world, those that like Secret Service and those that like Golden Gun. Bottom line is that it's not a #1 film, but it certainly shouldn't be ranked low because of an annoyingly unlucky Bond girl and a bad sound effect or one poorly motivated chase scene when Francisco Scaramanga is one of the coolest Bond villains of all time. The world's highest paid assassin who lives on a fantasy island with his sexy girlfriend and midget sidekick. Scaramanga is the first to show us that the best baddies are the ones that expose that fine line between good guy and bad guy, between self-service and self-sacrifice to the big picture. Ultimately placing it above Dr. No for the things that make it great, but below Connery's Golden 2 for its more ridiculous elements. The Spy Who Loved Me, definitively Roger Moore's best Bond film as a world-traveling, adventure-battling, and insane shipping magnate that likes to have sex with fish and takes his orders from Dolphumanoids. It easily jumped above Dr. No, but still not as rock solid as Connery's Golden 2. Moonraker is basically just the same movie again, but in space. It's fun and has one of the best bad guy motivations by going all Hitler on us and attempting to perfect the human race through genocide, but it's bogged down by being a goofy movie made for children and being loaded up with weird movie references and advertisements, landing just below Live and Let Die. For Your Eyes Only brought things back down to earth, but still takes time to include some wacky Roger Moore assassins and Mikey G. Whiz confusing plot elements of betrayals and turns that don't make as much sense when watching the movie more than once. But because the film seems to share a lot of commonalities with OHMSS, but does all those things better, it landed just below Dr. No. Octopussy is a good time, but has one of the most bizarre and unnecessary bad guy schemes in the entire series, but that train race to the bomb sequence is top-notch, landing this clown act just below Thunderball. A View to a Kill is another healthy dose of Roger Moore goofiness wrapped up in a really fun Goldfinger remake that led to a lot of yelling amongst us fellas, which ultimately led to a who's the better bad guy discussion in which we all agreed that there just isn't enough of a dive into exactly who Max Zorin is and what drives him, as well as any of that classic scenario in which Bond and bad guy exchange meaningful dialogue about their separate worldviews, that we once again put it just below the Dr. No threshold. The Living Daylights brings in probably the best Bond actor, Timothy Dalton, but unfortunately alongside a script that is beneath him in almost every way. The fake defection to kill a rival Russian general plot lacks clear logic, and the story overall lacks any real emotional hook, so there's just not much to really praise about this one other than Timmy Bond and a fun car chase. We put it just below Octopussy, which at least gives the audience something to care about during its excellent train race to the bomb sequence. License to Kill is much the opposite, with a simple and straightforward yet exciting assassination plot, including Bond going rogue to become friends with his enemy in order to destroy his organization from within, motivated by his murder of longtime ally Felix Leiter's wife, makes this an excellent and unique good guy revenge tale within the franchise, but it's simply a little too violent and unclassy to rank higher than Connery's Golden 2. Enter GoldenEye. Martine Campbell's first revelation takes absolutely every element that Bond has ever been and masterfully weaves them all into a singular, highly entertaining, and purely Bond-esque experience, complete with a new Bond, Pierce Brosnan, who manages to be as charming as Roger Moore, as classy/cruel as Sean Connery, and as emotive as Timothy Dalton. GoldenEye is the whole package, both classy and fun, and to be taken as serious as its unique collection of dangerous baddies that provide the ultimate James Bond experience. For anybody that thinks we came to that conclusion because we grew up with GoldenEye, know this: We also grew up with Tomorrow Never Dies, which is definitively the Michael Bay installment of the franchise. It's the biggest and dumbest Bond flick, and like all Bond, we love it, but in a guilty pleasure sort of way. It ranked nowhere near its predecessor, just below Thunderball, for being a big dumb action movie. The World Is Not Enough brings about Bond's greatest nemesis yet, a really, really hot lady who wants to take over the world. It's got a plot that takes a while to unravel and maybe cuts corners at times, but Electra King hypnotizing Bond, as well as the red herring bad guy Renard with her hot bod, while taking revenge on M for being a bad stepmom, is great bad guy stuff. But we put this installment just below the Dr. No threshold for showcasing one of the hottest yet most useless Bond girls to date, a lingering sense of TND's style big dumb action movie sequences, and a somewhat unremarkable climax. Die Another Day starts out pretending that it'll deliver a serious James Bond getting revenge against someone that betrayed him ordeal that quickly turns into an accidentally embarrassing but still fun cartoon of a movie and the most cringy Bond girl of all time, ranking it just below the movie it was attempting to remake, Diamonds Are Forever, a movie that actually knew it was a cartoon from the start. Martine Campbell's second revelation descended from the heavens in the form of Casino Royale, a reboot of the series, meaning that this is the opening act of a whole new Bond universe. You'll laugh, you'll cry, you'll develop a man crush on Daniel Craig, but most importantly, it's the type of film that helps Ian Fleming's soul rest a bit easier. However, we put it at number 2, just below GoldenEye, because while GoldenEye is the ultimate James Bond experience, goofy and serious combined, Casino Royale is serious business from beginning to end, which is great, but GoldenEye captures both that feeling and the fun factor that James Bond films developed over the course of decades. GoldenEye is a movie Cubby Broccoli and Ian Fleming would both love, while Casino Royale is all Fleming. Quantum of Solace is the depressing but exciting sequel to the events of Casino, where Bond goes on a murder spree after losing his babe Vesper to an unnamed criminal organization. While this movie is commonly underrated and thrown in the dumpster next to Mathis, we ranked it just below OHMSS for a bit of plot messiness and a visual style that goes too far in some places, but its greatest sin is retroactively messing with the characters and events of Casino in a less than fantastic way, horribly using and abusing Renee Mathis for no reason and making Vesper Lind look like a gullible idiot. Skyfall is a bit messy if you have more than 2 neurons in your skull, but after arguing about it for the usual 6 or 7 hours, we concluded that the things that make Skyfall great easily outweigh its frustratingly contrived plot, namely the story of an ex-00 agent coming back from the dead to get revenge against M for handing him over to the Chinese, protected by Bond, who she also kind of betrayed, but always for the greater good. The movie has some real meaning behind it, and possibly the best baddie in the entire franchise, easily beating out License to Kill, but its contrived plot and weak moneypenny and Q elements put it just below the From Russia with Love threshold of relative perfection. Last and certainly least, Spectre is a giant piece of filth that should never have been made and managed to take Bond's greatest enemy and turn him into an annoying whiny dunce who comes out of nowhere to try to convince everyone that he's the author of all of Bond's pain and has been pulling the strings behind the scenes for the last 3 films, while also filling us in that he and Bond are long-lost foster brothers and that he killed his own father and ran off to create Spectre, all because his dad taught Bond how to ski, putting him and Bond into an absurdly stupid self-aggrandizing loop whereby Spectre wouldn't exist if Bond didn't exist, and Bond wouldn't exist if Spectre didn't exist. Meanwhile, they fail to flesh out the more interesting plot element whereby the new head of MI6 is working with Spectre in order to trick the world into signing up for a dystopian global surveillance New World Order. It's so awful and stupid that it's almost as if Mikey G. Wiz said, "We want the bad guy to be Big Brother," and half the screenwriters knew he meant a 1984-style Big Brother-esque surveillance state, and the other half thought he meant a literal Big Brother, and they ended up just rolling with it. This movie easily fell to the very bottom because Where You Only Live Twice is a movie you want to pat on the head and say, "Sorry, you're adorable, but nice try." Spectre is a movie you want to repeatedly punch in the f***ing face
face. Now, here we are at the end of the line as of 2024 with No Time to Die. No Time to Die is the perfect title for a movie that is essentially all over the place, operating as one of those classic Bond titles that is a romantic toss-up to death because they couldn't come up with a central location, MacGuffin, or bad guy to name it after. However, the most accurate title would have been No Time to Comprehend Anything, because this movie is exactly what Bond would be like if Disney purchased Eon Productions and pumped out a Disney-fied sequel that nobody wanted nor cared for, like the recent Star Wars or Indiana Jones late-in-the-game sequels. It's bright, colorful, and flashy. It showcases James Bond not as he once was, but mostly as an old man who has grown soft with age. It's pumped full of references to other films, some subtle, some not so subtle. It overloads the movie with characters both new and old in order to fill out its obligatory epic movie poster. And just to be clear, none of these things are bad on their face. In fact, they are welcomed so long as the movie stands on its own and allows all of these elements to properly congeal into a satisfying whole. However, this late-in-the-game sequel has no direction, no gusto, no oomph that makes it feel like it should exist in the first place, but rather relies on the past to do most of the heavy lifting. And just as Disney would make it, it flies from scene to scene with little to no development as to what is going on and why. Hey look, it's Vesper, moving on. Hey look, it's Felix Leiter, now he's dead, moving on. Blofeld, now he's dead, moving on. Anna de Armas is really hot, is Bond gonna... Oh wait, no, moving on. Holy LGBT, Q is gay? Since when? Shouldn't Q as a character be the opposite of Bond, as in completely sexless or outright asexual or involuntarily celibate? I mean, as far as I was ever concerned with Q's home life, he was always more likely to f one of his gadgets than another human being, so it just seems like the producers only did this to... Oh, never mind, I guess we're moving on. Wait a tick, he has a Mr. Bigglesworth cat? Is that a reference to... Oh, f it, we're moving on. The agent that took over the 007 number when Bond retired after the last movie is really insecure about following in his footsteps. Maybe we should develop this relationship in an interesting way. Oh, wait, no, we're moving on. All of Spectre is dead? What is Safin trying to do and why? Why did Blofeld kill his whole family? The only henchman in this movie was for Spectre and now he's for Safin, even though his DNA would have been part of the Cuba attack on Spectre, so how did he survive? F it, moving on, moving on, moving on, moving on. The entire script feels like a game of telephone where each scene was written by a new screenwriter desperately plastering things on top of each other to get us to the end by any means necessary. This isn't a movie so much as it's an attempt to tie a neat bow atop this whole Craig era thing when we all know it probably should have ended already. Speaking of which, there's a remarkable similarity between the Connery and Craig films. They are two men that exploded into stardom with two powerhouse introductions, Dr. No and Casino Royale, followed by great direct sequels so far as Spectre as an organization pulls an Empire Strikes Back type of thing, a third installment with a top-tier bad guy that most people like that has nothing to do with Spectre and is more or less self-contained, a fourth film that goes back to Spectre, but that film's reach exceeds its grasp by focusing more on action than telling a good story, and an embarrassingly awful bad guy, and a fifth film that borrows heavily from Fleming's You Only Live Twice novel, while each actor that started off with such youthful gusto seems completely apathetic to the whole thing and just wants it all to come to an end. As for myself, I am officially taking a stance right here and now. I am forever done with Bond sequels. Unless they finally decide to adapt every book exactly as written and in order of publication, Bond sequels should be forever banned, and all Bonds should be made to follow the example set forth by George Lazenby. One movie per actor from here on. We bicker and argue about who should be Bond, and yet we're all wasting our breath. How about all of them? Then at least the filmmakers wouldn't feel obligated to continue stories they never planned to continue anyway. The leap from Casino Royale to No Time to Die is so ridiculous that it's like they're two different universes. Instead, one-offs, 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 one-offs. Bond is assigned to a mission and he executes it. Then maybe the writers might come up with something clever rather than desperately trying to tie up loose ends by shoving as much shit as they can into a single franchise-ending film, such as this one right here, No Time to Comprehend what's happening and why. Welcome back, fellas. It's an honor to have all of you back.
No, thank you.
I hope nothing horrible happens to you tonight. I hope we all survive the Nans. But anyway, we're going to change things up for this episode. We always end with a toast, but we all know we're going to toast to Daniel Craig. It's his last movie because he dies. We've said a million times he's definitively the badass Bond. That's like the attribute that he champions.
When you go back and you look at all the other Bonds, especially Connery and Roger Moore, they played the character all the way up until their 50s, I believe. 50s, almost pushing 60. He's at that age level, right? But if you look at him, you would never know twice. And I do appreciate an actor putting themselves to the limit and actually it's like, I'm going to be playing James Bond. He should be physically imposing. I should take care of my body enough to make my character look like I can do all these things. And I do appreciate that because going back to Roger Moore or even better is like Connery, by the end of there, they were just overweight, didn't give a shit. Just coming in, I'm old, don't care. Even Pierce Brosnan, same. I mean, I love Pierce Brosnan, but same thing. You know, he's walking into that hotel and he looks like shit. So I appreciate his commitment to the role, even if he had once said that he wanted to slash his wrist if he had to play Bond again. But I think it kind of does show that he still really appreciated the character. He really wanted to do it.
Yeah, I'll give him that. I would say he had dedication to his craft.
If you had to put him against anybody else, he's definitely up there.
I would agree with that.
You look back at how many years, like Craig started in 2006. He ended in 2021. How many years? That's like 15 years, right? I don't know how, I think that's the longest tenure, not movies, but the longest amount of time any Bond has been Bond. It's a long time, but he only did 5 movies.
Pierce Brosnan's at the top. And then Craig has 2 and Connery has 2 in our top 5. It is a testament to the quality of movies he put out, even though the Craig era is cursed. And we'll talk in a bit about hindsight being what it is, how it could have been greatly improved had they designed it ahead of time. But Craig himself, the grand slam that was Martin Campbell's Casino Royale, set a standard that was impossible to follow for the rest of the series, especially as they were kind of making it up as they went along. But the story of how everybody gave him shit when he was cast, and that drove him to maniacally work out and just be the best he could be to make Casino Royale excellent.
You've taken good care of you, buddy.
And then to try to do that again with Quantum, but just, again, writer's strike, whatever it is, it kind of ruined his stride. Skyfall brought it back a little bit, and then Spectre took a giant, that was like bukkake all over his face.
He can rest now. Craig can rest.
Yeah. I love that.
Obviously, the first James Bond to ever die, which is kind of cool, in my opinion. Daniel Craig, the badass Bond, Mr. Blue Eyes. His series isn't perfect, but goddamn if he didn't do an excellent Bond to break out of all the other Bonds. He brought the badassness like nobody else could to Daniel Craig.
Here. Cheers to that.
To James Blonde. To James Blonde.
To James Blonde.
To James Blonde. The badass Bond.
The badass Bond. Cheers.
To Daniel Craig.
Johnny?
What the f just happened? Hold on, let me check something.
No.
Whoa.
Oh my God.
There's not moving, man.
Did Johnny just have a seizure?
Wait, what happened?
Chucky.
Johnny, are you okay?
Johnny.
It's the Nanspot.
No.
The Nanspot got Junie.
Oh, man. The Nanspot got Junie?
Patterson, I brought you on for a reason. I need you to make a firewall to keep us safe for the rest of the duration of this podcast.
You got it. I'm enabling quantum encryption.
I was so excited that everybody was back, and now Junie's dead.
This is a bummer.
Anyway, McCurdy, what do you have for trivia for No Time to Die?
No Time to Die. Let's talk about No Time to Die. Purvis and Wade wrote an initial draft for the script going back to March 2017, laying out the general story. Also in 2017, several directors were in the running, including Denis Villeneuve, but he decided not to pursue because he was already committed to Dune. And then in 2018, Broccoli and Mikey G. Wiz then landed on director Danny Boyle, who along with writer John Hodges, would scrap the Purvis and Wade script. However, the same year, Boyle left the project before filming even began over creative differences with the script. I'm not clear if it was because of Hodges or if it was because of Broccoli and Mikey G. Wiz, but Boyle's take was going to have present-day Russia, more of Bond's origin, and the villain was going to be a Russian, of course. And Bond having a child was also an idea that formed in that initial script. But Eon quickly shifted gears to director Cary Fuji Fukunaga, which I'm going to butcher.
Cary Joji Fukunaga.
I think it's Fuji Fukunaga.
Carrie.
Fukunaga.
Joji.
I think it's Fuji Fukunaga.
Fukunaga.
Eon quickly shifted to director Cary Fuji Fukunaga. Fukunaga directed films such as Shinobre, Jane Eyre, and Beast of No Nations, and you probably best know him for directing the first season of The True Detective, which he won an Emmy for. This also marks the first time in Eon that Eon had hired an American director for Bond, which is funny because considering how British Mendes is about the last film.
Mendes.
Yeah, because, you know, the last movie, Mendes was very much like, I gotta make Bond very, very British, and then the next director they direct is an American director, which I think's kind of funny. Japanese descent American too.
True Detective season 1 is just one of the greatest things ever. Ever. There's a long single take sequence in True Detective, and then they did the same thing here where it involves a shootout. Even though it's in a confined space, I think it's even more impressive than Mendes's single take from Spectre.
Right.
Joji uses his single takes for a purpose, specifically to heighten the tension of the scene at hand, whereas Mendes's is show-offy and therefore pointless and therefore flat.
I remember when the Boyle thing was announced, both hired and then he quitting. Because I would have liked to have seen his, because it would have been a really interesting take. Like, at least he would have had a more unique style to it.
It's Danny Boyle. He's a natural to make a Bond movie. And remember, he made that video, was it for the Olympics? Are you going to get to this, McCurdy?
Oh, yeah. I remember what you're talking
where
about.
Bond, Daniel Craig Bond, and the Queen parachute into the 2012 Olympics. Danny Boyle directed that.
Yeah.
And so, obviously he directed that because it was like a kind of like a appetizer into this movie.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things where it's like, oh, wow, they're bringing in a well-known Oscar-winning director, just like Sam Mendes, to make this.
And what's he going to do instead of Bond? Yesterday.
Oh.
A very mid-movie.
So Purvis and Wade wrote the script alongside Fukunaga. So he's the first to actually have like screenwriting credit as the director and the writer. Before this, it's only been a writer and then directors done separate. There were a couple of uncredited rewrites by Paul Haggis and Scott Z. Burns. Paul Haggis, if you forgot, I believe he did rewrites on
Casino and Quantum.
Yet by Daniel Craig's request, Phoebe Waller-Bridge was asked to do a script rewrite, which she is credited for. People will say, oh, she's the first woman writer. She's not the first woman writer to write a Bond film. That goes to Joanna Hardwood, who co-wrote Dr. No and From Russia with Love. Waller-Bridge is an actor-writer. You may have seen her more recently in the Indiana Jones film, which is kind of weird based off of Chucky Rants' description of this film. But writing-wise, she's probably best known for her show Fleabag and Killing Eve. Mm-hmm. And I will go on and say, I personally think you can see, there's things that she does in this movie like that I can see, I'm like, she wrote that. Like, that has to be her. Specifically,
the handshake?
like...
Yes.
It was so nice to work with you. Yes, it was. I respect women.
Yeah.
You were excellent.
You too. Next time, stay longer.
I will.
Hey, a cigar for Felix.
Thank you. Come on.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Okay, bye.
One that I would say that's not like feminine based, it's more like the jokey stuff when our evil scientist guy is in the lab and they're doing pranks on him. I'm like, that seems like something that she wrote. She wrote a lot of stuff to add a lot of comedy to it. She was the one who was adding a lot of the levity to the Cuba scene. So you can kind of blame her for that. But a lot of it was because they wanted her to pump up Ava Armadillo. They wanted to bump her character up. And again, I do think this is something where kind of could blame Craig because he's like wanting to put his fingers in everything now and be like, well, I want all this stuff in the movie. And you're like, Craig, like, I know you're the actor, but like, calm down, that's my take on that whole thing.
We talked about Pierce. Pierce was so passive and he's like, yeah, just whatever. Just tell me the lines to say.
Yeah.
And it's like, come on, Pierce, like, you can stand up for yourself and make demands. But then the moment the next actor does, it's like, shut up and just say the lines we give you. Stop having opinions. Yeah, get out of here.
I think when it comes to some of the tone shift in this movie, there's almost a part of me that thinks he did Knives Out and then got to this movie and it was like, I want to bring some of that Knives Out energy to this movie.
The donut hole has a hole in it, Sarah. It is not a donut hole, but a smaller donut with its own hole. And our donut is not a hole at all.
And no one said no. Like, no one was like, they couldn't say no because he was a producer. So you're like, what are you supposed to do?
We saw it with Sean Connery. Sean Connery eventually was like, F*** James Bond. Like, F*** these movies. I'm tired of this. I don't want to be attached to this anymore. I'm going to go do something that is completely anti-Bond. Connery, though, him as a person, he is James Bond. Daniel Craig has done everything he can to subvert James Bond. He's done let me go do a weird advertisement where I'm dancing around like I'm at a gay club or something. It's just, let me do whatever I can to subvert Bondness, to escape the character. That's why his performance in this, he never once feels like James Bond. He does, you could argue that he feels like retired James Bond. You could argue that, but he doesn't, this movie doesn't feel like Bond.
So Fukunaga had originally had an idea that the movie would take place all in Bond's head while he was in the chair being tortured by Blofeld until the third act, which is kind of a cool idea. And I think that would have been that would have changed the dynamic of how Spectre is perceived by a lot of people.
Yeah, it would have justified why that ending was like a video game on easy mode.
But obviously that idea never came to be. Safin and his henchmen were originally going to wear Siberian bear hunting armor, which you should look it up right now. It is the most metal fucking looking thing I've ever seen. It's basically just all face armor and there's spikes everywhere on the body, but they decided to go against it. They originally were going to have a henchman that was going to have that, and they changed their mind. They ended up going with the Kabuki mask with Safin.
They still snuck it into the movie, though. You see a spiked helmet in the corner of Safin's inner sanctum.
While there are other movies that pull plots from books that weren't used, this movie does the same thing and pulls a lot. The later half of the film is pulled directly from You Only Live Twice. The actual plot line where there's a
suicide
castle,
the poison
suicide castle, poison gardens, all that stuff. And I think that's where Fujiyama was thinking of this whole idea of having them have this Siberian bear armor, because there was a point where Blofeld was head to toe in samurai armor. So I can see where there's definitely all these correlations where they were just pulling a plot point from something else and putting it in here. And I thought that was a cool choice. Bond being killed at the end actually goes all the way back to when Craig started in 2006. He had stated that it was the only way he could see his tenure being closed. That's what he wanted. He wanted to die eventually. Mikey G. Wiz, as we like to call him, had said the fitting way to deal with a situation where a person is risking their life all the time, eventually the odds catch up with you. And I'll say the way that he dies in this movie kind of feels that way. You feel in another movie, he would have gotten away, but this one, it's there's nothing we can do.
You've been poisoned.
Yes.
When this movie was announced, when it was they're doing one final Craig movie, and because we all know that the Craig era is self-contained, right? Reboot with Casino. You have a new first movie, so you can have a new final movie. The moment that was announced, I was kill Bond. And then when the movie came out and people had a problem with that, and people were that's bullshit. You can't kill James Bond. I was no, makes sense. You don't understand. This is your one and only chance to do that. You won't be able to kill Bond again. You have to do it now, and you have to make it as meaningful as possible.
He's never going to die of old age.
I like that he sacrifices himself for his family. It maybe would have been more, one could argue would be more appropriate if he would have died for his country specifically. I need to die for England. Dying for his let's say wife and his lover and child is pretty great, and and all that. But my point being that this was your only chance to do it, and so I'm very glad they did. I think it was. I have zero problem. In fact, I cheered on. I actively anticipated it happening. Was very happy to see that it did happen.
So filming location included Italy, Jamaica, Norway, the Faroe Islands, and London. I would have loved to see Venice again, honestly, but I do appreciate that the movie's hey, we're going to go to Jamaica, because if you know anything about Fleming, he loved Jamaica. So, and even the first movie, Dr. No, is in Jamaica, which is cool.
Remember, where he lives is Goldeneye.
Yeah.
Oh, that is Goldeneye.
That is Goldeneye. That is Ian Fleming's Goldeneye, where every Bond novel was written in Jamaica. The whole thing was always that James Bond will never retire. Every 00 basically ends up dying.
I knew it was too early to promote you.
Well, I understand 00s have a very short life expectancy. So your mistake will be short-lived.
In this series, in the Craig series, Bond does retire once he meets Madeline. That doesn't work out, of course, but then he ends up retiring in Jamaica, living in Goldeneye, the Goldeneye, where every novel was written. And then, of course, they named Goldeneye the movie after that.
So, of course, Craig and the gang all return. from the previous film, including Léa Seydoux. However, she isn't actually the first Bond girl to be in 2 films. She is the first lead Bond girl to be in 2 films. Let's just make that distinction, because if you guys do remember, because you guys were there, Sylvia Trench was like, when we watched Dr. No, she was Bond's girlfriend in the beginning of that movie, and then she shows up again in From Russia with Love. So she's technically the first Bond girl to be in 2 movies, by character, I should say. But Léa Seydoux is the first to continue her character on. So let's talk about our villain real quick. We got Rami Malek, who plays Lucifer, Safin.
Yeah, it's Lucifer. It's like,
Yeah,
Lucifer.
I'm Mr. Kill.
AKA the bringer of light, AKA the devil.
Yeah, the devil. So Malik, by the way, Malik went to Scoot Magoot's school, by the way. He went to Scotty's alma mater.
He went to
Yeah,
Evansville?
I don't know. So he went to University of Evansville in Indiana, because that's actually a really good acting school, but that's where he went to. He has Egyptian parents. He's Egyptian, essentially. Probably most recognized for the show Mr. Robot. Before he kind of blew up and won his Oscar for Freddie Mercury in a movie that I don't think is very good, but, whatever. His acting, he's a great actor.
Problems.
Yep.
We've stated this many times in the more recent Craig movies. It seems like whoever wins the Oscar, whoever's the next big name, that's who's going to get cast as the next big bad or the next big character. And that was same with Christoph Waltz as Blofeld. And he's returned again in this film. We got Lashana Lynch, who plays Nomi, and that's her name, is Nomi. I thought she had more to her name. She's just Nomi. She's the other 007.
Thank you, 007.
I think it's M. It's M Nomi. So we don't know what her
M Nomi.
We don't know what her first name
so
is.
We don't know her whole name, but everything I've looked up, it's just Nomi. That's how they spell. That's what they list her as. She's Mariah Rambeau. She was in Captain Marvel. I actually think she does a pretty good job in this movie.
Yeah.
She's also of Jamaican descent, so I think that's kind of cool. And I actually like the fact that it's kind of a perfect that who takes up the spot is a Jamaican in the thing that Fleming really loved.
My only complaint with the women of this movie is that there isn't enough of the women in this movie. I mean, that's like all these cucks that are just like, Ana de Armas is the best Bond girl ever. I'm like, if you like her so much, don't you think there should be more of her?
Yeah.
So Ana de Armas plays Paloma. Blah blah.
Paloma.
Thank you. My tongue's not working.
You forget
today,
things when you get nervous.
I'm very nervous.
It's
right
a
now.
line from the movie. Go ahead.
I'm nervous because the Nans
singing
bot.
about
The
leaving it
Nanses, man.
Dude.
So for American audiences.
Wait.
Are we good?
Yeah. Okay. Keep going.
I swear to God, I keep hearing knocks on the back of this door, dude. He's in our house.
For American audiences, she was probably first seen in Eli Roth's Knock Knock, where she had to learn her lines phonetically because she didn't know English. Since then, she's been in several big films such as War Dogs, Blade Runner 2049, and Knives Out, which also stars Craig. So it's like the second time they've worked together. Billy Magnuson? I think that's how you say his name.
Magnuson?
Billy Magnuson.
Whatever.
Magnuson plays Logan Ash. He's creepy. I could see him in other great roles.
Yeah, he's
just
got
with
a
that smile
creepy
and that
smile,
look.
man.
He's like the American version of Bill Skarsgård.
Yes. Or what's that new show that's out right now with like the monsters?
I know,
that
Scott,
just
why are
smile?
you holding a gun?
I'm waiting for Nans.
Oh.
The Nans.
You understand that he's not physical, he's digital, right?
I don't care. I'll shoot the laptop. Tell me that won't work.
Scott, I miss you. I miss you so much. David Dinnick plays Dr. Valdo Obershoff. He's a Swedish-Danish actor. He plays our creepy scientist, which I really do feel like was a callback to Boris from GoldenEye. Like, that character kind of reminds me of a... I think it's a Boris, because, like, think about it this way. Boris is introduced at a lab. It has the weapon.
I am invincible! I will put Ebola in your tea.
And everybody hates him because he's a prick. When the bad guys come, they snatch the weapon and they snatch him. But then at the end of the movie, he's at Safin's poison factory making the deadly weapon. It's the same thing that Boris is doing. He's helping make sure that the GoldenEye weapon goes online and does its thing.
I'll give you that. I never once thought of Boris, which is kind of shocking, but I'll give you that. Boris, just with
random, out of the blue racism.
A little bit, yeah.
I do not need a laboratory to exterminate your entire race from the face of the earth.
I felt like he was trying to plead for his life, like almost saying like, hey, we won't kill all the black people.
Dude, you can't.
You know,
you
I
can't,
know how to do
You
that.
can't explain that moment. That moment is definitively
so
stupid.
weird.
Let me stand up on this catwalk where if you push me off of it, I'll melt in the acid, and let me threaten to not just kill you, but to kill all black people on the planet. It's definitively the dumbest part of the movie, and all it needed was for him. You know, in Cuba, he should have been like, these Hispanics, they are inferior to us Russians. I will kill everybody in the planet except Russians. I love, you know, like anything to show that this guy's racist, but out of nowhere, he's like, by the way, I'll kill you and everybody who looks like you. And every time I just crack up, I'm like, what? And then she's like, what? Come on, sugar.
Do you know what time it is?
What?
Time to die.
Suddenly we're in a blaxploitation. We're back in Live and Let Die all of a sudden. Like it makes no sense. It's ridiculous.
That's all I have. Nans, what'd you think of this movie? Oh, right. We don't do that anymore here, do we? Because we found out Nans was actually a robot from the future trying to kill us all. But we are protected by a quantum encrypted wall right now.
Which, all right, let me cut in, Charlie. Remember that fucker tied me up. So how are you going to tell me he lives in a computer? He's still physical.
None of this plot makes sense.
Listen, I will explain. He actually went digitally into Scott's brain. Scott actually tied himself up.
Yeah, probably. I'm into kinky shit anyway, so.
Yeah, that was a very odd turn of events.
I'm still grieving internally, like emotionally trying to like fix my internal self.
I wrote it on a piece of paper, and then I set the piece of paper on fire, and I threw it off my deck.
Right.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, I've been sitting here quietly considering all you have said, and I've come to the conclusion that Moonraker and The Spy Who Loved Me are the only movies that matter. I am now going to overload my CPU and die.
Dude. Did the Nans get Patterson too? McCurdy, how's the firewall?
I don't see the firewall. It was here a second ago. It's gone.
Okay. Guys, in one night, the Nans managed to kill Junie and Patterson. This is crazy.
I wasn't told about Nansbot when I got back to this.
Jeff. Prayers, man.
Can we keep going? Because, you know.
Don't let him die in vain.
Well, let me ask you this. Jeff, what did you think of this movie?
Well, I saw it was going to be a 2-hour, 45-minute movie. I was like, oh, man, this is going to feel forever. And I'm like, the pacing was actually impressive. Like, actually flew by really quick for me.
As I said, this whole movie is like, keep moving, keep moving, keep moving. They packed so much into it.
Constantly goes. It looks gorgeous. It sounds gorgeous. But most of the time, I'm like, I like a lot of random Bond movies. Like what the f*** happened in this movie again? What's the point? What's the motivation of this villain? I don't know.
Yeah, what's
Keep
happening?
going. I'm glad Craig got like a real ending. Not many Bonds get that.
It's the only send-off.
It's always like, well, that was their last one. Connery, he was just gone, done, and then like came back for that random, not official Bond movie like once, and it felt weird. Yeah. I always felt bad for Brosnan. He had to end on Die Another Day, and like even that, they feel like a real ending to his Bond. So I was glad for this one to go that route of like him really having an ending.
Yeah, it was a good send-off.
I know.
We'll talk about like nitpicks with it, but overall, I've seen the movie 3 times, and I'm gonna sit here in my big boy suit and say 3 out of 3 times I've gotten very emotional watching James Bond die.
I cried.
Very effective.
I found myself in tears.
Yeah,
very
myself
effective.
Emotionally in tears.
Oh, dude.
I love you.
I love you too.
She does have your eyes.
I know.
When it comes to the whole movie, though, and this is what I was trying to get to about the tone, it does feel like someone's in the driver's seat, and then they switch drivers, and then someone comes back. The original driver comes back to the driver's seat, and then finishes it, and you're satisfied. But that's I think kind of part of the problem with the movie is that it wants to have its cake and eat it too. Like it wants to have these humor moments, and like specifically, the Cuba sequence is the moment when the movie goes. You can literally see Phoebe grabbing the keyboard from Neil and Purvis and going, okay, this is mine now. I just want to be clear. I don't think her style of writing is bad. I don't think like what she's doing is necessarily bad. But I do think when you're thinking about a Bond movie, it doesn't feel like a Bond movie. Not because in itself is terrible, but it does remind me of a Roger Moore movie. Like it does remind me of like, oh yeah, I could see this being like, if they were going to do Roger Moore today, this is what that would be. It just feels inappropriate at this time. Like it had, because we had already established what the Craig era was going to be. So it's almost like they were like, let's put on the Roger Moore and then like turn the switch. And then that was that sequence. And then like, okay, let's go back to Skyfall and Casino seriousness and turn it off when we go to Norway.
And I called this all the way back in the Man with the Golden Gun episode. I was like, you guys watch. When Daniel Craig movies decide to get goofy, they're going to bring back a J.W. Pepper character immediately. And what do? Bring in a goofy scientist with a thick Russian accent. You know, where he's like, you poison my soup and I'll kill you.
And I don't think it helps that Daniel Craig's like buying into it and be like, yeah, I like these ways these lines are saying. I'm going to say my lines like this.
I want to do everything I can to subvert Bond because I hate Bond because I've had to do press tours for the last 20 years.
Going into it, I really do like the opening. When it comes to the story, we're going to go back to that story and plot argument that I made with OHMSS and some of these other movies. But when it comes to the story about Bond moving on, and trying to have his own life. And they bring me back, you know, Al Pacino, they bring me back in.
Just when I thought I was out, they pull me back in.
I love that story. I love that whole thing. And I think that's appropriate for the last Bond story. And then, and it's funny because watching this movie and knowing how we've argued OHS, MSS, it does feel like it's answering to those issues with that movie with this film. But I will say that the problem is, and going back to Spectre, is their relationship's kind of like, I kind of don't 100% buy it. And I don't know if it's her performance. Yes. I don't know what it is.
That was one of my big nitpicks was their relationship. It just doesn't feel natural at all. Like, and also she looks like a child next to Daniel Craig.
We all know Bond is going to be with younger chicks. He keeps getting older, but those Bond girls stay the same age. and it's like, you know, that's how it is.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's just weird to me. It's like, that's the one he is having the child with and everything always felt like the weirdest to me.
Jeff, I'm just meeting you for the first time in my life, even though I've known you my whole life. Scott, you've been tied up in my closet for a long time.
I've been in this closet for a long time.
So what I'm getting at is you fellas down there, comment as you will. But McCurdy, what is your initial rank overall?
Okay, so I'm actually trying to be somewhat objective about this. Because again, like I'm trying. But the emotions get to me. And the highest, because I was looking at it, I'm like, you know what? The highest for me could probably be like just above Octopussy or below The Living Daylights. That's the highest I think this movie could go. And I think that only because I remember going back and thinking about Octopussy and how that plot is so convoluted and so messy and doesn't make a lick of sense. And again, the Bond villains in that movie are kind of so-so. They're not great. There's nothing extraordinary about the Bond villains. I think that movie's so weirdly low-key, and there are some good moments in it, but it doesn't like hit very hard. And then you got a movie like The Living Daylights that is a little more serious. But the one thing I think that pulls that one down is it just ends on such a, okay, whatever. This movie's not the opposite.
I have the same range. My lowest would be above Spectre. My highest would be below Tomorrow Never Dies, which is above Octopussy. So you and I have the same high. And I think the same, kind of the same low.
Yeah, I would not put it as low as next to Spectre. I think it gives more of a than, like, I think I would say it's next to Die Another Day. Like, I would put it, like, at the lowest. I really think it's either above or below Die Another Day. And I only say that because in the same sense that we talked about Spy Who Loved Me, this movie really feels like the best of Bonds. And I'm like, oh yeah, this is greatest hits of Bond. No doubt. And they want to do that because it's like, oh, this is like the last Bond movie. So he's dying. We're going to do everything we can to kind of shove these little bits and pieces in there. Even the Roger Moore silliness, like we're going to put that in this movie as well. And I think that's where I'm like, it does a little bit better job in that department than Die Another Day did. And I do think that even though Die Another Day got probably a better villain or a little more clear stakes villain, I still think that it's just such an obtrusive, just silliness movie, and it's so like trying to be this big action film. Where this movie, I think, is a little bit more classy than Die Another Day. So that's where I would say it's like above and below Die Another Day, but I think at the highest I would put it above Octopussy.
That's where I was looking at, somewhere around like the Thunderball, Tomorrow Never Dies area, under Quantum, or maybe under
I think
Thunderball.
I am just above Octopussy.
The biggest thing for me with this rank is that, McCurdy, back in Casino Royale, you were saying this movie doesn't really give me Bond vibes in the way that specifically something like Goldfinger and From Russia with Love do.
Right.
That was alien language to me. I'm going to go, what are you talking about? Just Casino Royale. I feel that watching this. I'm like, I don't really have Bond vibes watching it. I have Disney-fied Bond vibes. I have like a Star Wars Episode 7 vibes, where it's like, maybe it looks like Bond, maybe it sounds like Bond, but is it Bond? Make a list of all Bond things and throw that all into the pot and just sell it. And that's where, for me, that's where the struggle is, because I agree with you. We have the same range, below Tomorrow Never Dies, above Spectre, but I do hone in on Die Another Day specifically. I hone in on above or below Die Another Day, but the element that trips me up specifically is Octopussy, Bond movie, Living Daylights, Bond movie, Live and Let Die, Bond movie, so on and so forth.
But you couldn't. You wouldn't. Not after what we just done.
I certainly wouldn't have killed you before.
That Bond feeling isn't there for this. There's stuff I like. There's stuff that doesn't feel like Bond.
I do remember making that argument on another movie we talked about, which was License to Kill. But License to Kill is a revenge plot. And I kind of, is in the same realm of that argument, was that part of the problem with License to Kill, and I think we have viewers that dislike that movie, that hate it for, various reasons.
I don't understand it.
I actually like that one. I remember like that, because that's the Felix one, right? That's the revenge.
Where he avenges Felix's wife. That's number 6 on our list.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying.
That movie's
I think
awesome.
That one, but I think what makes it so not Bond for me is it does seem to be like written, like if this movie is written by like today's writers or whatever that do a different style, like are more comedic writers, right? In the same realm, I feel like License to Kill is written by 80s action writers of the time who are just like pounding out all these crazy action sequences, and it's really like riff and cruff and like less classy, which is what Bond is. That's what kind of separated the Arnold Schwarzenegger Stallone era versus the 60s Bond classiness of like being a gentleman, being a spy. Specifically, just the Cuba sequence in this movie is the only part of the movie that I feel exactly what you're talking about. That section of the movie feels like Roger Moore Bond to me. And it feels like kind of contrived and silly and all this stuff. And then the rest of the movie feels a little more close to like even Bond's acting and everybody else, the tone of what's going on. That feels more like on track. Like this is what I came to go see. This is kind of the tone that was set in Spectre and Skyfall and the other previous films.
Yeah, not for me. I do not get James Bond out of this. And if I had to put my finger on it, it's that Craig plays a lot of moments a little too emotionally, even for a retired Bond.
Get me into Belmarsh.
No, Blofeld's the only member of Spectre still breathing. I can't risk that.
Oh, but you will risk developing a DNA targeting weapon with a corrupt scientist for 10 years?
It does. It's Spectre.
Mallory.
What have you done?
Yes, I know how to interrogate an asset.
This interrogation is over.
Tanner! Don't lecture me!
So not only does he not feel like James Bond, he doesn't even feel like Craig's James Bond. He just feels like Daniel Craig in a nice suit.
Do you know the worst thing about you?
Beyond Craig's performance, there are deeper issues with the character. Your problem with License to Kill beyond the unclassiness was always a subject matter thing. You said James Bond shouldn't be outside his jurisdiction fighting a drug cartel. He should be spying on Russia or something. But for me, it's always been about the James Bond character. And Bond's character is all over that movie, so that's one of the reasons I love it. If I have been consistent about one thing, it's that whenever Bond breaks character, I throw the movie in the James Bond could star in a zombie movie and I wouldn't care so long as he brought his character with. Yeah, Roger Moore may have looked old in his later films, but he still behaved like James Bond, a man treating himself to pussy galore in exchange for continuously living on the edge of death. I agree with you that the choice between self-sacrifice for the big picture and a comfortable home life with Moneypenny or anyone else has always been a great theme for Bond.
Her Majesty's Secret Service is still my job.
But we saw him go through that already. That's his entire arc throughout Casino Royale and Quantum and even Skyfall, where losing Vesper hardens him and solidifies his character as Her Majesty's loyal terrier 007. As I said before, one could argue that this feels like a retired Bond, but retired Bond is already something of a contradiction to Fleming's original character, unless it were to continue the arc established at the end of the previous film. But instead, they just repeat the Vesper thing, where once again he thinks his potential wife boo betrayed him to Spectre. This movie doesn't embrace his arc from the last film and expand upon it in an interesting and one-of-a-kind way that makes use of how this Craig series has all been interconnected, leading all the way up to where he would retire. It just pointlessly resets it again. The fallout from that is nothing, really. Bond doesn't go back to work, he just stays retired.
But it's so obvious you're a man who only has time to kill. Nothing to live for.
Thank you, Nomi. That's exactly the problem. Last time Bond lost his reason to live a life outside of Her Majesty's Secret Service, he went on a murder spree. This time he buys a cottage and a boat? Yeah, he's old, but he's not that old. Bond being retired only makes sense if it's for a reason. He lost Tracy and went back to work. He lost Vesper and went back to work.
Why not stay dead? You have the perfect way out. Go and live quietly somewhere. Not many field agents get to leave this cleanly.
He could have retired after the opening of Skyfall, but he didn't because
we're under attack. And you know we need you.
So I'm sorry, I just can't get behind the premise that Bond stays retired after losing the reason for why he retired in the first place, unless he looks like this. And even then, it'd be more of a believable storyline that he took over for M or something rather than just retiring to GoldenEye. He should be one of two things. Either back to his old ways, or happily married with a kid. He should be living the way Lazenby would have had Tracy not been killed. Bond should not have lost Madeline at the beginning of this film. He should be living in GoldenEye with his wife and daughter when Felix Leiter shows up needing his help. The famous James Bond who pulled off the impossible and managed to actually retire from being a 00 without buying the farm. That way, whenever Felix shows up, there's actually something to lose. There's actually a choice that needs to be made. There actually is a sense of,
just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in.
Bond would of course initially say no, but think about what elements this story already has that could possibly motivate him. We have a bad guy whose mission is to kill Spectre with a stolen weapon that targets their DNA. Bond might say, what's so bad about that? Whatever is left of Spectre post-Blofeld should be wiped out anyway. At which point Felix would respond that the weapon also kills anyone related to those agents. And hey, both your wife and baby girl share DNA with your old friend Mr. White. So if you don't come out of retirement and help us with this thing, your family is going to die. My overall point being that if you're going to do retired old man James Bond instead of classic James Bond because you're continuing your 5-part series, put just a little thought into where he's come from, how he's already changed, and what that means for this story going forward. As it is, Bond has no reason to come out of retirement, but motivate him with his family and suddenly everything is much more meaningful. For example, nobody would blink an eye when Poonhound James Bond, who would traditionally the out of Ana de Armas, respectfully shakes the hand of the hot young female agent he's been paired up with. Maybe in a completely different Cuba sequence, she comes on to him, but he respectfully declines the invitation with a handshake because the whole reason he's teamed up with her in the first place is to save his wife and daughter, further emphasizing he's a changed man and not just behaving differently because a narcissist teamed up with a pussy to virtue signal that Bond is progressive by writing him to not behave like the character whatsoever. You're having him be Mr. Badass, who also performs the role like he's still in Knives Out, while also not being sexist at all because we don't want to offend anybody, but by trying to do all of these things at once, it all comes across as flat and uninteresting. So I rank it very low. Initially, my brain goes to above or below You Only Live Twice. I think on emotionality alone, I think on end of movie alone, I think the fact that a James Bond movie could
move me to tears is enough to push it above that you only live twice threshold of just general apathy, kind of going through the motions. Spectre drives me to the emotion of hate, whereas You Only Live Twice is just like, you're so cute. You tried so hard. You go get yourself a cookie. You know, whereas with Spectre, I'm like, you go f***ing die. It gives me the same feeling as Die Another Day, where it's serious stakes, but everything it does is cartoonish while not being particularly enjoyable. I mean, yes, at times, but it is a mess. I mean, this is a mess. We've established that it was written by 17 different people, all pulling it in different directions. Yeah. It's very much like The Rise of Skywalker, where it's like just plot, trying to just get us to the end of the movie. Just get us to the end so we can just tie a bow on this whole thing. But when you get to the end, it's so deeply emotional that I'm like willing to bump it above You Only Live Twice on that alone. But then I hit Die Another Day and I'm like, there's kind of a struggle between Die Another Day and this film.
Right. But here, for me, the ending like bumps it up way more, because I'm looking at all these movies and it's like, even one of my favorites, Unmentioned Secret Service, it's like it does a better job of like landing that than any of the other movies. Like there's no Bond movie that I cry to at the end of it. Like there's none. Like yeah, Unmentioned Secret Service is sad, but like this is like takes it to a whole other level, and you're like, God damn it.
But if the rest of the movie was awesome, that would skyrocket it. But just having an emotional ending it's like this movie has an advantage of just being the final installment, which means that they could make an ultimate sacrifice type scenario, which gives it an advantage. If only the rest of the movie was as good, then this is one of those, again, a situation where it's like, this might be a contender for number one. But if all it has is a great ending, but it takes you 3 hours of bullshit to get there, that might put it above You Only Live Twice, but it doesn't automatically mean it's better than anything at that bottom tier.
I like the analogy of this versus Rise of Skywalker for another reason, though. It's not just let's go from beat to beat to beat to beat to get there. Rise of Skywalker was a movie that came out to answer to fans' complaints about The Last Jedi, because there were a lot of fans who just didn't like The Last Jedi. Whether you liked it or not, I'm not arguing that point. My initial thought on that movie particularly is that I feel like Rian Johnson is a really competent and respected director and writer, and I think he does a great job. I think that what he wrote was like a misunderstanding of what the assignment was. You were supposed to write about frogs, my man, and you wrote about sidewalks. And everyone's like, this is a really well-written piece about sidewalks, but that's not what we were supposed to write about frogs.
Yeah, you get an F.
That's what it feels like to me. That's what it feels like to me.
An F, I worked my ass off on this thing about sidewalks. Yeah, but you didn't do what was assigned.
Exactly.
You get an F.
And that's how I feel. You were supposed to continue a story that people like and feel within the confines of what that world is, and not try to bear too far off the mark. When they got to Rise of Skywalker, it's like, okay, we got a lot of angry fans. Throw all the nostalgia that we can at the fans.
Bring back also, everybody. Bring back the Emperor. Bring back Felix Leiter. Bring back this. Bring back Blofeld.
And we'll kill them off in the process.
And then kill them.
Let's rewrite the beginning of the movie so that we can like kind of apologize for what the last movie was that wasn't well received. So like, that's kind of what this movie does. The problem with it is just the motivations are very unclear.
That's how I felt.
Like the villains, like it's because of this whole, like, we got to apologize for the Spectre movie, so we're going to kill Blofeld off. Great. Okay. But how do we shift gears to I'm going to kill millions? The only thing I would have done to change that little bit, though, and Charlie, you might agree, is just be clear as to who they're killing, because they already set this thing up where they said, hey, this thing was supposed to be intended to use to just kill a single individual and be very efficient and be like, oh, we got to kill the president of whatever. Okay, we got the DNA. Boom, he's dead. That was what it was intended for. It wasn't intended to be a mass weapon. But when Q is getting the data for all the DNA sequences and all the text files, he's like, yeah, they're all, I have to go through this. They're all like, but they're all categorized. I got to go through this. I got to figure it out. And they're never specific. The only fix that I would have done is have Safin say something about like, look, Spectre tried to ruin your relationship with your wife and has ruined your life and was the author of all of your pain or whatever the bullshit was. Spectre killed my entire family, and I think we should get rid of all the bad people in the world. We should get rid of anybody who could potentially create an organization to kill people. And then that turns into millions and millions of people that could or could not be innocent. And then at least that leaves the end choice being a little more dynamic where you're like, oh, like that's why he's doing this. That makes sense. That's smart. It kills all the little baby Hitlers out there. Like that would be great, but that's not in the movie. So we never hear that. Like if that line of dialogue was there, we'd be like, oh, okay, that makes sense.
Something else, they never said anything about EMP resistant nanos. So by the end of the movie, we just repeatedly hear Q saying, there is no cure for Heracles.
Once Heracles is in your system, it's there forever.
Once you have it for life, even though it's common knowledge and also several Bond movies have laid out the nature of EMP.
All microchips were susceptible to damage from the intense magnetic pulse of a nuclear explosion.
Set off a nuclear device in the upper atmosphere. Creates a pulse, a radiation surge that destroys everything with an electronic circuit.
They kind of needed to cover off on that. That, like, I mean, Bond even has an EMP wristwatch.
Yep.
Electromagnetic pulse. It'll short any circuit in a hardwired network if you get close enough.
By the end of the movie, it's like, can't we get a second opinion before you kill yourself, Bond?
Abort missile. Abort missile.
Couldn't you just remote det the missiles and then go to the other side of the island and like coordinate some kind of thing where eventually Q would be like, now Bond, you're in quarantine and stay in quarantine for a while. Hey, look, we've developed the EMP whatever. And the EMP thing has cleared Heracles from your blood, and now you're good. But in lieu of that, on the one hand, the sacrifice moves me to tears. On the other hand, you have to cover off on alternatives.
And you finally touch. We are their curse. Madeline, Mathilde, a kiss would kill me instantly. And life is all about leaving something behind, isn't it?
This has to be 100% locked in that you have to die, and then I'm there with you. But as Bond's dying and I'm actively crying, I'm like, shouldn't he have gotten a second opinion?
If you get it on you, how do you get it off?
You know as well as I do that you can't. It's permanent. It's eternal.
Are you sure about that? This
It's
is
only
kind of an
Q.
experimental thing.
Q's the only one who says that. It's like, Q, let's get a second opinion. Oh, Bond, let's set the GoldenEye off on your position first.
We just needed the one line of dialogue.
They're EMP-resistant nanos.
That's all you needed.
That's all I needed.
All we needed. We
Yeah.
didn't need anything else.
I kept thinking of Metal Gear Solid. It was like all about nanotech.
It looks like the DIA recently developed a new type of assassination weapon. An assassination weapon? It's some kind of virus that targets specific people. What are you trying to say? It's too similar.
You know, those last couple of lines back and forth, it's never been discussed. He knows that's his daughter. She won't admit it to him.
She's not yours.
But, okay, the blue eyes, just...
She's not yours.
Okay.
But he dies for it.
She does have your eyes.
I know.
Holding that little bunny in his belt.
Do you notice in the beginning, though, how he puts her on the train, and what does she do? Do you remember the action she does?
She holds it. She grabs her hand. She goes like that. Yeah.
She grabs her uterus.
Oh, we all knew at that
She grabs her
point, but-
baby belly, and right away you're like, she's pregnant, because that's where her brain goes. I'm going to be a single mom. It's a tragic moment, which McCurdy, at this point, that is the longest prologue in Bond history, right?
Yes.
It's like 23, 24 minutes. And then later he meets...
This is Mathilde.
Hello.
Mathilde. So it's funny. It's Madeline and Matilda, which are like two childhood properties for us, for our generation. Madeline, that property, and then Matilda, another property.
A positive point to this movie. One of the best death scenes. Like, yeah, no, I had a brother.
Yeah.
Nice moves, Bond.
You won't be able to stop him. So why don't you help me out, brother?
I had a brother. His name was Felix Leiter.
The garage scene. He lifts the door up. You see the bulldog, which you guys covered heavily in Skyfall, perfectly describes Bond.
The big picture.
So,
that is a
when
symbol
does
of the
he
big
see
picture.
the bulldog the last time? He loses his mother. This time, his brother has just died. The car he reveals is the old Aston V8 Vantage that was in Dalton's movie.
That's cool.
So I just wanted to mention, Scott, because it's been a long time since we've seen you on the show.
Yeah.
And you and I used to talk about the music on the show. And Billie Eilish does the song. We could talk about that, but I just thought it was so random watching this movie for the first time since it came out in theaters, and didn't realize Hans Zimmer does the score for this film. I thought that was I was like, wait, Hans?
Yeah.
Booby.
Honestly, like I didn't guess that was Hans Zimmer when I heard, like, from the beginning. I'm like, oh, this sounds like very classical Bond kind of style, orchestral, because Hans stuck in that percussionistic style music.
Honestly, I am no fan of Billie Eilish personally, but I do not hate the song. I enjoyed it.
The first time I heard it, I remember it ended, and I was like, did I just hear was that a song? Or wait, I couldn't even recall the melody. Was that just somebody whispering over? What happened?
Yeah.
It's hard to nail down the tone of this movie, but at least in that beginning, I do like the song. I came around to the song. I do like the song. It does kind of fit the way the movie opened.
I liked it more than the Spectre song.
You Know My Name, as I've said a million times, for me, it's the Bond song. The lyrics perfectly describe the man. That's why I like it. And the energy behind it. Every time you're going into Casino Royale, it pumps you the f*** up. Now, the opposite of that is No Time to Die, where it is very subtle. She's literally whisper singing the whole time. But there's a certain beauty in that. It does match the opening of this film.
Yeah.
So I appreciate it, but I'll never turn away from... I mean, it's literally the difference between No Time to Die, the movie, and Casino Royale. One is youthful, one will punch you in the face, the other one is retired and slow and old. So it's, you know, there's an apples and oranges type of thing there to it.
Maybe a lot of it's Hans, but this whole movie is so beautifully orchestrated on the back end. Like so many scenes when Leiter dies and he's swimming out of the ship, when he's getting ready to die and the big violins and the orchestra comes up and he's crying, he's looking at the sky watching the missiles come in. It's Final Ascent is what it's called. It was written and composed by Hans Zimmer, as McCurdy pointed out. While it's not obviously the best Bond movie, somebody who finds passion in a movie through music and scenes to tie yourself to them, this movie stands up a little further just because of that.
Yes, the classic Bond shots of him driving up the roads, the swooping strings.
They use a lot of On Her Majesty's Secret Services music. I also like how they use the original version of the Bond theme, because a lot of times it's been redone several different times, whether it's orchestral or whatever the popular music of is at the time. Even our favorite GoldenEye, you know, utilizes that low-pitched xylophone sound that we hear that we're like, oh, we love that. But like this movie, it was like, oh, it's like the last one, so let's use the old guitar and stuff. And I think stuff's really cool.
Hindsight being what it is for the Craig era, the movies should have gone Casino, Quantum, Spectre, No Time to Die, and then Skyfall. Because Skyfall's all about Bond being old and resurrection and all that shit. There is a terrific 5-act structure hidden amongst these movies had they been planned ahead of time. Casino Royale is still our amazeballs introduction to the newly promoted 007, learning his lesson about the importance of trust and that he's a protective outlier destined for service to the big picture at the personal expense of a regular home life. Quantum of Solace further elevating these themes by testing that duty to country against the desire for personal revenge against agents of the organization responsible for the death of Vesper. At the end of this second installment, Bond interrogates Green and learns all about the previously unnamed organization behind everything that has happened thus far.
I answered your questions. I told you what you wanted to know about Spectre.
The inciting incident that perfectly sets the stage for what's to come. But Spectre and No Time to Die, in this alternate reality,
would have been a two-part story where Blofeld wins and gets the CNS online. So Spectre, movie 3, drastically escalates things. Bond takes what he learned from the last movie and manages to infiltrate a Spectre meeting where we are officially introduced to the head of the Squid, Ernst Stavro Blofeld, who absolutely has zero relation to Bond, definitely not brothers, because Bond already has a brother, goddammit.
I had a brother from Langley.
But it turns out that Spectre has already infiltrated MI6, and the new C is working with Blofeld to bring about a global surveillance state. Bond and allies try to stop them, and while they manage to give C his comeuppance, the CNS comes online and Blofeld gets away. Spectre has a global intelligence apparatus, and it becomes like Minority Report, right? Like, he shows his face anywhere and Spectre's gonna be able to find him. So where does he retreat to? He, of course, switches out his company car for his DB5 that doesn't have a tracker and heads to his childhood home of Skyfall. This time for a clear purpose and not just because a psychologist mentioned it a few days ago.
Skyfall.
Far off the beaten path where this new Eye of Sauron won't find him. For the first time ever, Bond has lost and has retreated with his tail between his legs, a la The Empire Strikes Back. Blofeld wins. The bad guy wins. We've never had that in a Bond movie. It ends on a downer note. So that then in the follow-up, it could then be Bond overcoming impossible obstacles to save the day. So this whole Spectre storyline climaxes with No Time to Die, in which Bond is now facing a task that is not only impossible, but arguably the highest stakes of any James Bond story ever, battling a Spectre that has finally achieved its ultimate goal of complete global control. Global destruction is one thing, but I would argue that global tyranny is far worse, and I'm sure Bond himself would agree, but he no longer has MI6 because MI6, as well as every other intelligence agency worldwide, is now a part of this tyrannical system, meaning Bond has officially gone rogue, as we all know he is one to do when he has to, actually bringing to life that amazingly wasted visual metaphor from Mr. White.
You're a kite dancing in a hurricane, Mr. Bond.
But he has his friends and allies. Q, M, Moneypenny, and Tanner also go rogue, and of course Felix Leiter joins them too.
And also a smoking hot CIA agent or scientist with big tits.
M informs them of the one hope they have, something only she was privy to, something she herself began developing in secret after Spectre completely took her by surprise back in Quantum.
What the hell is this organization, Bond? How can they be everywhere and we know nothing about them?
A DNA targeting weapon that has been secretly developed at an MI6 black site. It's only a matter of time before Spectre gets their hands on it, but at the same time they can use this technology to kill all of Spectre all at once. Now the title No Time to Die actually has some real meaning behind it, as our band of heroes have no choice but to act quickly to save humanity. With Skyfall acting as their new headquarters, our band of rogue misfits carefully craft their plan to steal the weapon and use it on Spectre and save the world. It's exciting, it's classy, it's fun, and Bond fans unanimously agree that it's the greatest James Bond film of all time, and it's #1 on everyone's list, but wet blanket hipsters still claim OHMSS is better because it doesn't chase trends by trying to be Mission Impossible, and they also don't like that Bond didn't cry in this movie. That is until that story is topped by the ultimate James Bond film, the GoldenEye of this 5-part series, Skyfall. The one with the theme of, you're old now, Bond, Spectre is gone, the world is saved, you can retire now, we don't need you anymore. In the wake of No Time to Die, there is peace. So Bond is bored as hell. He is indeed an older fella that has run out of bad guys to fight, so he fills his time with what he does best. Booze, fast cars, fast women, and hitting the casino as often as possible. Meanwhile, there's a theme that Bond has made even more irrelevant because in this digital age of DNA targeting weaponry and drones, Bond has been made redundant.
I'll hazard I can do more damage on my laptop sitting in my pajamas before my first cup of Earl Grey than you can do in a year in the field.
Oh, so why do you need me?
However, when an ex-00 agent shows up to seek revenge against M and MI6 by stealing
the computer drive containing the identity of almost every NATO agent embedded in terrorist organizations across the globe,
Bond is put on the case. They know where the stolen list may be and they send in Bond to get it back. Q, of course, suggests they just drone the building, but M needs to be completely sure the list is either retrieved or destroyed.
What happened?
They're on the train, Mom.
What do you mean on the train?
I mean they're on on top of a train.
When it appears that Bond may fail, M orders Q to hack the train's computer system and derail it. But little does she know the list thief has already transmitted its contents to an unknown recipient, thereby needlessly sacrificing her greatest agent while balls deep in the hubris that technology has won the day. And y'all know the story from here, which would for the most part be Skyfall as is. Bond ends up doing the you only live twice thing where he's believed to have been killed, but he survives and heads back to Skyfall, back to the place without technology where maybe he will stay, maybe he will retire and get out of the game while the getting is good. But when MI6 is bombed and their embedded agents begin being killed off worldwide, Bond comes back to once again highlight that fine line between the goodness of serving the big picture through self-sacrifice versus the evil of sacrificing others for your own corrupt ends, and how a good man can fall to such darkness with just a little push. Our villain Silva is the most dangerous villain of the Craig era because he easily thrives in both Bond's realm of practical spycraft as well as Q's digital domain. He's all of the best qualities of Bond, Q, and M operating a fully realized shadow version of MI6. This would undoubtedly be the most meaningful Bond film of all time, combining the best of the best themes, including his relevancy in today's digital world, coupled with a villain that is his equal but opposite shadow, all wrapped up in the metaphorical brilliance of Skyfall itself, representing that temptation always looming over Bond to choose the comfort of a normal home life over being Britain's savior. Speaking of which, what about Bond dying? Does Bond make the ultimate sacrifice? Maybe, but I believe there is no stronger ending for this 5-film series than exactly how Skyfall, such as it is, concludes, with M telling Bond that there is still lots to be done, gloriously nailing the overall theme of the eternal struggle between chaos and order, and that Bond is still relevant and always will be because there is no lasting peace, and good people will always need bad men to protect them against the forces of evil.
It was the job we were chosen for.
The general problem is that they went in going, hey, we're going to reboot the franchise. Great. What does that mean? I don't know. And then they go to the next movie and they're like, let's do a direct sequel. Great. And then they did a one-off, which was great. It's kind of the same thing with Star Wars. You do wish that when it came to the sequel trilogy that they had written out like, okay, this is kind of what is going to happen in all three of these movies. This thing that we're setting up in the first movie, this is what it is in the last movie, but it just never does.
I'm here to pick up some delictados.
Delictados? We haven't made delictados in 30 years.
There are a lot of references throughout the whole movie, especially in the title sequence. It's like you get your Thunderball thing, you get your Dr. No thing. They make a reference to the gun barrel turn and shoot, which is kind of cool, but also kind of odd, you know, to pay homage to oneself, especially in a movie that already has a turn and shoot. Like, what if Casino had a gun barrel opener, but then also had the bathroom turn and shoot? Just kind of seems redundant, or something that some other franchise would do as a shout out. And then at the very end, Madeline drives down a tunnel that narrows the frame into a tiny white circle, just like the ones that every movie typically opens up with, but this time we're closing with that. It's mostly OHMSS within the story itself, and there's stuff here and there, right. But like, it's not like it was with Die Another Day. Something that I find kind of odd is that in the book, the OHMSS book is pretty great, and I recommend it. But something that happens at the outset is Bond goes back to Casino Royale annually. He goes back every year to relive his victory and to remember Vesper, but he goes back every year to relive the thrill of that first big win. I don't understand why that wasn't a part of this. Why don't we do that here? Damn it. Instead, the movie opens up in Matera, Italy. Why is Vesper buried in Italy? Why wasn't she sent home?
Why isn't she buried in England?
In England. Why wouldn't they send her body home to England? Why is she buried in this random acropolis? Like, it's kind of an awkward, that's an awkward thing.
It is a nitpick, but I 100% get what you're saying.
It's odd. It's like kind of a convenience thing. But I still think that, again, reading OHMSS, you have an opportunity where you have this reboot series that started with Casino Royale. You could have ended it with showing how Bond goes back to Casino Royale, and you can fan service, you can refer to your really good movie, but instead they don't. Instead, it's this weird bomb situation where later Blofeld's like, oh yeah, I put a bomb there and I just let it sit there for years.
I knew you'd come visit it. I just needed to wait for the bon moment.
And that's very clever. That's very Blofeld-esque.
I was questioning as far as like, well, why would he just be like, no, be gone with you. This is it. Like, I'm done with you. We can't be together kind of thing. And I thought about it more and I was like, it seems like he'd be like, oh no, this was Spectre. I knew this wasn't you.
What happened?
How did they know I was here?
What are you talking
Madeline,
about?
how did they know I was here?
But then I forgot, oh wait, how did him and Vesper end? Vesper is like his true love, right?
Mm-hmm.
Vesper betrayed him. So then I'm like, oh wait, that's right. Oh, that's why he acts the way he does towards Madeline. I can't trust you. I can't even think about it. I'm like gonna over second guess myself to the point where I'm like, I can't be with you anymore. We gotta part ways. And it's heartbreaking.
I mean, it honestly is a really bad look for Madeline.
I'll tell you if you tell me about Vesper.
Is that why we're here?
She's buried at the Acropolis.
I know where she's buried.
The fact that she took Bond there specifically to visit the Acropolis is a bad look for her, but that's only if you're just looking at this movie. Otherwise, the whole thing is too much of a stretch considering what she and Bond have already been through. Vesper was probably in love with Bond, but she was definitely still in love with her boyfriend that Spectre was holding hostage in order to control her. But here with Madeline, what possible motivation could she have for betraying Bond at this point?
Your father would be so proud of you.
Her father's approval? That's just plain stupid and is a complete misunderstanding of Madeline's character. Yeah, she and Bond have trust issues stemming from their separate backstories, but something isn't quite adding up here, especially because they keep hinting at her having some kind of dark secret she has yet to reveal.
And when her secret finds its way out, and it will, it'll be the death of you.
You have to let her go, even if it's hard.
So I do this, and then...
I'll tell you all my secrets.
But that just ends up being the fact that Safin once tried to kill her, which is irrelevant in this context, and her pregnancy, which she fails to tell him about purely out of convenience.
Why would I betray you?
We all have our secrets. We just didn't get to yours yet.
What if she would have told Bond right then and there at the train station? No doubt he would have come to his senses and realized this whole thing was just Blofeld being Blofeld.
Vesper's grave. Madeleine didn't do a thing. It was all me.
It's so empty that I almost wish her betrayal had been real to showcase that her childhood really, really messed her up.
Madeleine, she's a daughter of Spectre. She's the daughter of Spectre.
Or maybe Blofeld had threatened her unborn child if she didn't betray Bond or something, but instead there's nothing. There's no dark secret whatsoever. Once again revealing just how stupidly contrived most of this script is, which is why they keep the whole movie moving as quickly as possible before anybody notices. This whole ordeal really just underscores my previous comments about how this movie shouldn't have broken them up in the beginning, because it completely wipes out whatever character arc we saw from Bond and Madeline in the last movie, regardless of that movie's rock bottom status on the list, and exposes the opening for what it is, a pathetic excuse to jumpstart the movie with action for the sake of action rather than continuing Bond's story from the previous film. Showcasing a really boring home life would have been the most appropriate way of opening a movie about James Bond in retirement. But no, we have to go back to Vesper again. The idea that Bond is still hung up on Vesper over a decade later, even after retiring specifically to be with Madeline, is really just lame at this point.
Can you forgive her?
I left her behind a long time ago.
Yes, several movies ago. I thought we were past this by now.
Forgive her.
Don't get me wrong, Vesper is a great character, but are we really gonna drag this out for another? It's a fifth movie?
I miss you.
Things probably wouldn't have worked out in the long run anyway, dude. Just get the over it. A better movie's prologue would have been about new 007 failing to stop the theft of Heracles or something, while Bond enjoys retirement with his wife and daughter before being called back into action. This would set up why new 007 is so insecure, coupled with the drama of Bond choosing to risk all he's built for his
pathetic love of country.
Instead, they repeat the ending of Casino because reference, even if it hardly makes any sense. Again, the bomb is a clever play by Blofeld, but that cleverness is undermined by also having a group of assassins on standby 24/7 waiting for Bond to visit the grave. It's literally no different from The World Is Not Enough, where Elektra very cleverly arranges to have her father's kingpin detonate Renard's money bomb. But then for no reason, there's also an assassin shooting at Bond from a boat just so we can have an exciting action scene. The bomb and the phone call would have been enough, but that's assuming Blofeld didn't want to kill Bond.
I didn't need to kill you. I'd already broken you. I wanted to give you an empty world.
But just wanted to frame Madeline.
It's Blofeld, my love. Your sacrifice will be our glory.
But if that's the case, exploding a bomb 2 feet in front of Bond's face makes both Blofeld and Bond look stupid. Blofeld's stupid because if his intention was to frame Madeline, then he should have designed a scenario wherein somebody called Bond away from the grave just before it exploded to create the illusion of a failed assassination attempt. Something would have pulled him away. He walks away and then it blows up and maybe it kills somebody else. This failed assassination coupled with the phone call would really look like Madeline had tried to kill him. But Blofeld did both the bomb in the face and the phone call, which makes no sense because it's like he planned to make sure the explosion didn't kill Bond, which is even stupider and makes Bond look the stupidest because the very fact that he survived the explosion at all, one could argue, is evidence enough that it wasn't a real bomb, but was more of a special effect to manipulate him. Having the bomb go off in his face, you're like
right there. I tried to figure how the did he survive
should be dead.
that? Stone blowing up to his face.
Yeah, he should be dead. But regardless, what did Blofeld want? He says later he wanted to frame Madeline in order to split them up, but if that's the case, why send the assassins after him too? Giving it the benefit of the doubt for 2 seconds that maybe it was all for show, shouldn't they have at least waited until he confronted Madeline? Like, was Primo pulling his punches? Were these guys missing Bond on purpose? It's all very much like For Your Eyes Only, where Christados' men attack Bond to make it look like Columbo wants Bond dead, but it doesn't look like a charade. It doesn't look like a setup. It looks like they're actually trying to kill him because the filmmakers aren't putting any thought into the intrigue. But what about me? Am I thinking too hard about this? Maybe, but only because it's details like this that lead me to believe that nobody gave a shit about the story here and only wanted to pump this movie full of action and references to better films. OHMSS references, McCurdy, you referred to a few. It's mostly through the music, and then obviously we have all the time in the world.
Now we have all the time in the world.
We have all the time in the world. We have all the time in the world. You have all the time in the world.
All the time in the world, which I swear, I really wish that was the title. I swear to God, that would have been a more fitting title for the movie, because you have Bond going off and having a life outside of the agency and then being pulled back in. Like I mentioned it earlier, but that to me is very specific OHMSS stuff that I think is the part that I think gets a lot of people, because I like that story. I think that's a great story, because he has an internal conflict. He has to choose from his personal life, like a normal life, versus having this life of this fantastical life of being essentially a superhero. So there's that reference, but also there's more, because when you look at the plot of the movie and what is this thing that is going to kill all these people, is essentially the same thing that was in OHMSS.
Our great breakthrough since last summer has been the confection of a certain virus omega.
Infertility.
Total infertility.
We're sending out all of these women who have this perfume that has this deadly virus that's going to kill everybody.
Yeah.
But this is like an updated version of that.
They're nanobots. Microscopic biorobots that can enter your system by the slightest contact with your skin.
It's a deadly virus that's going to kill everybody.
Hell, you even see her do the perfume on her wrist and everything before she sees Blofeld.
Exactly.
I mean, the only thing they're missing in this movie, I think, is there's no skiing in it. But still, like, it's... like pieces of it are there, and some of it's pulled from Spectre, of course, because even in Spectre, Mr. White is a bad guy. Madeline's the daughter of this villain, so it's kind of connected with Drago being Draco from On Her Majesty's Secret Service is not a bad guy, but sort of a bad guy, or is a criminal at least, and so he's the daughter of a criminal. Also, in the book, at least, this was something that you and I harped on a lot on that episode with On Her Majesty's Secret Service, is that Tracy is supposed to be a little more world weary and stuff because of her dad being a criminal and stuff. They don't do a great job of showing that kind of stuff. You actually see how Swan had to deal with all the super spy, evil society, assassin stuff in her life. You also see that she knows how to use a gun. Those are things that I think that we nitpick the shit out of on Her Majesty's Secret Service, specifically with Tracy, is like she just comes out of nowhere and starts fighting people, and it's never established. This movie at least does a great job of like, hey, it kind of makes sense why she knows how to use a gun. It kind of makes sense why she knows how to do all these things. She doesn't like doing them, but it makes sense.
There are two things that I absolutely love in this movie, and that's one of them.
What are they?
The first one is when young Madeline shoots Safin.
I love that. That was actually set up in Spectre.
A man once came to our house to kill my father. He didn't know I was upstairs playing in my bedroom. Well, that Papa kept a Beretta 9mm under the sink with the bleach.
Every time I watch that moment, I'm like, good girl, good girl. The other thing that I love is Safin killing Blofeld's entire family, his Spectre family, in front of him.
But I see you from my little eye, and my little eye says hi.
Just like what Blofeld did to him.
Blofeld ordered my father to assassinate this family. Spectre's poisoners. My father held a banquet for them, used their own recipe in the dessert, dioxin. They would have suffered horribly. Scarred him for life.
Blofeld killed Safin's entire family in front of him. Safin turns around and does the same thing. Speaking of which, as far as Goofy Scientist guy goes, Spectre's having a party. We're walking around the room. I don't know if you guys noticed, but Mikey G. Wiz is a Spectre agent.
Why wouldn't
His
he be?
cameo is during that sequence. But then we get to Blofeld's plan. Gather up Spectre to have them witness the genius death of Bond, because Bond has been subverting everything they've been doing for years. Great. So here's James Bond's DNA. You got to program Heracles to kill Bond. That'll be the climax of our party.
James Bond. Goodbye, James.
He subverts it. He changes the DNA.
Oops. Sorry.
But he hides it from Eyeball Guy, our only henchman in this movie.
Cyclops.
Bond refers to as Cyclops, but his actual character name is Primo.
That's 2 movies in a row where I didn't know the henchman's name. Mr. Hanks and Primo. I didn't even know their fucking names, which just goes to show how little characterization they're putting into these guys. But then Eyeball Guy doesn't die. You have Eyeball Guy who tries to kill Bond in the beginning.
Blofeld sends his regards.
And then he shows up in Jamaica to snag Bond's toothbrush.
Will this sample be enough for you?
If he has used it, yes.
Scientist Guy hides what he's doing from Eyeball Guy, even though later Eyeball Guy ends up being a
Safin supporter.
A Safin supporter.
A Safinite. He's a Safinite.
So then also, Scientist Guy looks at Anna de Armpit and says, "Are you my escort?" And she's like, "What are you talking about?" It begs the question, who was his escort supposed to be, right? Instead, something that would have been intriguing and spy-esque while also painting a better portrait of Cyclops would have started at the USB scene. Scientist, unaware that Primo is in on the Safin scheme, drops the USB and tries to do his switcheroo without Primo seeing, but Primo catches him in the act, suddenly grabbing the scientist's hand holding the USB. The audience thinks, oh no, he got caught. What's gonna happen next? But then Primo says something like, is everything to Mr. Safin's exact specifications? Scientist would nod with a terrified look on his face, and then Primo would tell him to finish his work because the party is getting started. A simple moment like that would have communicated to first-time viewers that something fishy is going on and that a betrayal is near, but because we don't yet know who Safin is, it would maintain that unexpected turn that the attempt on Bond's life would backfire on Spectre, and establish that it was all orchestrated by Primo, Logan Ash, and Safin. And then after the nanos are released, he'd grab Scientist Guy and escape with them. But then it's all thwarted by both 007s. A false victory that is soon after thwarted by Primo's other ally, Logan Ash. Instead, Primo is 100% Spectre, and yet out of pure convenience, they were never able to get a sample of his DNA, even though he's been Spectre for years. And then Safin sends Logan Ash to recruit him for no reason other than to keep him in the plot in one of the dumbest scenes in the movie.
Logan Ash, pleasure meeting you. I am sorry for your loss. I believe you know who I represent and work for. We have an opportunity for you.
Because remember, like when he first shows up, when they steal the stuff, he's one of the guys that Safin's like,
they're coming.
Who?
Spectre.
They're gonna grab this thing from you, and you're gonna go along with it. Okay, so Cyclops is Spectre, right?
Yeah.
And then he just shows up with Safin at the end, and you're like, what?
Shouldn't you have died? Shouldn't you be dead?
Right.
You were a part of Spectre at the time. You should be dead. And then later, Madeline's like, he let you join. I'm like, yeah, but before you would have joined Safin, you would have already been killed.
Do you trust him? He made me kill your last master. Why
do you think he let you join him?
But then at the same time, why did they bring on Primo? What did they need him for? He's more of a liability than an asset, having killed all of his people. Recruiting him for no reason only led to Q finding Logan Ash because Primo was dumb enough to livestream his recruitment meeting to his then boss, Blofeld, whose eye had been confiscated by MI6.
A bionic eye, which we've now retrieved.
The line alone is enough to kind of indicate that we've come full circle into Goofy land. The line of
Blofeld's eyeball unlocked.
It's like, okay, we're officially in Goofy world. Did Safin and Ash not anticipate that the eye might be confiscated after the party? Didn't they know Blofeld had linked eyeballs with Primo, considering that's how they killed Spectre in front of Blofeld? Wasn't that the point? He was only a loose end at that point. They should have let Primo die with everyone else.
Cheesiest line in the movie.
Cyclops. We ran into each other in Italy. That was an eye-opening experience.
Had that guy died before, that would have been a Bond joke.
His line for the death of him, when he killed him with the EMP, I thought that was a cheesy one.
Yeah, that was cheesy.
Like,
that was that cringe.
That delivery was...
That, in fact, is a Bond joke. Our one Bond joke.
Sounds like you're in a rugby scrum.
I just shot someone your watch. Really blew their mind.
But then at the same time, you're sitting there being like, hang on, the nanobots is one thing. Like, why didn't it kill the nanobots? That's one thing. But also, why wouldn't the EMP then mess with Bond's comms? Like, wouldn't it blow out his earpiece? Like, right after that, Q is talking to him. It's inconsistencies like that where you're just like, okay, this is made for just like general audiences and not anybody with a brain. And that was kind of the theory on Spectre and also Skyfall.
And how strong is it?
It's fairly strong.
Fairly strong? What's that mean?
You haven't had the chance to test it properly, just be careful.
So they get Bond to go to the party, to get a scientist guy that is also on Safin's team.
Valdo Obrachev. You're gonna say you never heard of him?
Never heard of him.
You never heard of him? Didn't he defect during your tenure at MI6?
But the whole thing about getting Bond to the Spectre party is very loosey-goosey. What did the CIA need from Bond specifically?
You're really the only guy for the job. You're the guy.
You have Logan Ash being like, you're the guy, you gotta go to the party. If it was, hey Bond, this scientist guy that defected during your tenure, he'll only let you scoop him up. Like, he insists that the famous James Bond 007 pick him up in Cuba after this party. Like, he'll be at this party and he insists that it be you. Like the living daylights.
He expressly asked for you to protect him.
Why me?
He's under the impression you're the best.
They insist that the famous 007 be there to scoop him up. There literally is no reason for Bond to come out of retirement to go do this thing at all. There's nothing pulling him there. What if Bond just said no? Then Spectre's plan would have failed, and then also Safin's plan would have failed. It's like all these things relied on each other for it to happen, and it just happened because the script needed it to happen.
The only thing that came to my mind, because the way that Leiter talks about it, he's like,
our elected leaders aren't playing nice in the sandbox.
And it was almost like, we need to get this weapon. Like that seemed like the motivation. In the same light as when Bond would be in other missions where his superiors are telling him, no, you're not going to go do X, Y, and Z. You're going to stay in your lane and let whatever else happens, but that's not your mission. You can't go on it. My thought was that Leiter is doing the same thing where his superiors are telling him, no, we're not getting X, Y, and Z. And he's like, no, we got to get the thing. Meanwhile, Logan Ash is like, we can't do it, but you know who would be great to do it? Is that James Bond fella. And we can like entice him because it's supposed to be a Spectre thing.
He's leaving out the best part. Spectre.
I have a contact there. Says they're gathering.
Coincidence?
What makes Bond the only guy for the job? What element is here that would motivate happily retired James Bond to get back in the game? So it's good that he tells Felix no, but then because the new 007 tells him not to interfere, which he already didn't want to do, he then feels compelled to call M and talk shit. And then comes to the conclusion that he wants to steal back the stolen weapon that he knows came from a secret MI6 lab because the famous James Bond, typically motivated by duty to king and country, suddenly wants to join up with Felix and the Yanks to not help them with some random drug smuggling problem like in Live and Let Die, but to actively work against MI6 and Her Majesty's government? By all appearances, Nomi had everything handled, so what compelled Bond to go to that party? He has a slight suspicion reason that M did something wicked.
What have you done?
M helped me build it.
But at the end of the day, that thing is still in England's best interests, and working against that doesn't make any goddamn sense.
I've dedicated my life to defending this country. I believe in defending the principles of this. Stay out of it. This has nothing to do with you.
It does. It's Spectre.
Well, if that's true, then why are you retired, Bond? If you still care about Spectre, why aren't you roaming the Earth hunting down the remaining members, George Lazenby style, instead of living in GoldenEye? Or did you already forget that they blew up your old girlfriend's grave and split you up from your baby mama at the beginning of the movie? By all accounts, Bond didn't give a shit about Spectre after he captured Blofeld. So all in all, this movie is just screaming for some personal stakes.
Who's the birthday boy?
Ernst Stavro Blofeld.
Is he here?
No, he's in London in prison.
This is all classic Mikey G. Wiz writing where they don't care about the logic of anything so long as there's some surface-level compelling turn, i.e. when the nanobots kill Spectre instead of Bond.
You want me into a trap, didn't you?
What trap?
Spectre's dead. Sit. Who's dead? All of them.
And then again, 5 minutes later, when Logan Ash does his thing. At this point, literally everything is just dumb. As soon as he had the scientist and the weapon, why didn't Logan Ash just pull his piece and put down Bond and Felix while he's not under suspicion? Oh, right, because we gotta keep up the manufactured intrigue.
You were never the intended target.
He was a target? Why?
I changed the DNA like we decided. Now the plan is complete and I'm confused.
Who is we?
He is not allowed to do
M
this.
make you build this?
He is out of line here, Felix.
Did M
Ash.
order you to kill Spectre?
Don't answer that.
Is M behind this?
He is out of line.
Felix!
Ash, shut your mouth!
So what was Blofeld's plan to get Bond there? Again, Blofeld, not Safin. Was he aware of what Ash was doing? Safin sent Logan Ash to recruit Bond to go to this party. Blofeld is trying to attract Bond so he can kill him, but then also Logan Ash and company are trying to get Bond to do the thing so that then Bond will be there so they can do the switcheroo and kill Spectre instead of Bond. And it's just like, what was Spectre/Blofeld's plan if Bond was just like, no, I'm not going to show up. I just want to be in retirement.
The biggest part of the problem is that they never establish, is Logan Ash a double agent? Like, could he have been playing 3 different sides all at once? And we don't know that. We're never told that.
It's heavily implied that Logan Ash told Blofeld because of this odd glance between scientist and Ash.
Blofeld? How did he know I was going to be there?
As if he recognizes him or something. But seconds later, scientist introduces himself to Logan Ash, so clearly he had no idea who he was.
I'm with Safin. You understand?
Yes, I am Dr. Obruchev.
I know who you are.
So here's another one of those very simple and obvious little changes that would have clarified things. If the eyeball recording scene between Logan Ash and Primo had been recorded before the death of Spectre, it could have specifically included Ash telling Primo, and therefore Blofeld, that Bond was going to show up to the party. Maybe at that same moment he gives Primo Bond's toothbrush as proof of this. What would have been even cooler would have been if Ash and a traitorous Primo had planned the whole interaction out ahead of time to specifically manipulate Blofeld, getting him to let his guard down and open himself up to the Heracles attack on Spectre. But the weakest part of all is that for some reason the existence of Heracles really pisses off Bond.
Why didn't you shut it down? Why didn't you shut Heracles down?
I answer to the interest of my country, not you.
And to Felix Leiter?
I certainly don't answer to Felix Leiter.
Perhaps because he's dead.
Oh my God, Bond, who are you? Don't you remember coming to terms with the big picture several movies ago? You really think M gives a f that your best friend is dead?
Hardly the big picture, wouldn't you say?
And speaking of which, don't get me wrong, I like the Craig vs. Felix Leiter just fine, but if I'm being completely honest, I don't feel anything when he dies because his overall significance in these movies is extremely limited and their connection is drastically less realized than in the original series. The most dire thing that we as an audience have ever been through with this Felix Leiter is a poker tournament, and yet they say things like,
"Come on, Felix.
We've been worse than this.
But regardless, Leiter wanted to steal Heracles from your country, Bond. Technically, that makes you a traitor, dude. M totally has grounds to let Nomi flex her license to kill on your ass. Had he said he wanted to destroy it so nobody could misuse it, I would at least understand where you're coming from. But all Felix ever said was,
help us get this into the right hands.
Oh, what? And you're the right hands.
Which, for all intents and purposes, they are the exact same hands that you seem to be so disapproving of.
What was I working on?
Something he should have shut down years ago.
We could double the runtime of this review talking about the morality of Heracles in general, but as far as the British government is concerned, it's a fantastic idea up until the damn thing gets stolen. It's like the atom bomb. If we don't make it, somebody else will, and they'll use it against us.
Obrachev is working for someone who managed to kill all of Spectre.
It took out the most evil cabal of sociopaths the planet has ever seen, all in about 2 minutes. And this bitch-ass Bond is whining about it.
Whoever stole your weapon used it to wipe out Spectre instead. Now your weapon is on the run, and nobody seems to know who has it. So you can imagine why I've come back to play.
And then Bond claims that this is why he's come out of retirement, even though his stated reason for coming out of retirement happened after he'd already come out of retirement. So again, I say that this movie is just gagging for some goddamn personal stakes. It's messy. It's fucking messy.
Yep.
Yeah.
What's your guys' take with Safin himself, like, just being Dr. No? Like, the way he looks, like the dress, he's on his island.
Visually, yes. But when it comes to villain motivation, Dr. No just wanting to showcase Spectre's power far exceeds Safin's complete absence in that department.
I'm sure the West would welcome a scientist of your caliber.
The Americans are fools. I offered my services, they refused. So did the East. Now they can both pay.
One element of his character really works, and the other element, I wanted another scene to just kind of clarify something for me. His plan is he's going to get rid of Spectre. He's going to get rid of this evil organization.
Revenge on them for his family. Yeah.
Then he shifts gears. He takes the weapon, essentially, and then is like, hey, I'm going to kill everybody. But it's not specific. It's like, I'm going to give people oblivion. But I really wish that they would clarify, who is he killing? Like, is he killing everybody? Because they made this weapon that and I do wonder if because Captain America Civil War did something very similar where they were like, not Civil War,
Winter
Soldier. They had this whole thing where it's like, oh no, we're going to kill all the people that could be a threat to us or whatever. Yeah. And you're like, no, that's still millions of people.
They're in categories. I'm going to need more time to organize.
There have been breaches around the world of databases holding DNA information.
Ours?
I can't imagine they're leaving us out.
We are probably on that list. That's all you get. You need to specify these are troublemakers. Yeah. These are independent thinkers. These are people who are going to trouble our New World Order.
They're not just attacking individuals.
They're going to kill millions.
And if you're killing that many people, who are you not killing? Who are you saving? Who are the people who aren't going to die? At least with the Russian guy could be like, I am going to kill everybody who is not Russian. And then it's like, okay, he's going to kill off everybody except for this ethnicity. But you don't have that. Instead, it's like, what is the limitation here? We need a limitation.
You just needed a line of dialogue. Like that, it could have been in that scene, and they just decided to cut it. And I just want to know, was it we're going to get rid of everybody that could potentially become another type of Spectre? Like, I do like that back and forth between him and talking about
James Bond, history of violence, license to kill. Vendetta with Ernst Blofeld in love with Madeleine Swan. I could be speaking to my own reflection.
We've made slightly different choices.
No. We've just developed different methods for the same goal.
You guys have heard me say repeatedly that I'm all about the we're not so different you and I stuff.
We both eradicate people to make the world a better place.
When that fine line between good guy and bad guy is highlighted.
You work for peanuts. A hearty well done from Her Majesty the Queen and a pittance of a pension. Apart from that, we are the same.
When I kill, it's on the specific orders of my government. And those I kill are themselves killers.
Oh, come, Mr. Bond, you disappoint me. You get as much fulfillment out of killing as I do, so why didn't you admit it?
But after this moment, Safin just spirals off into gibberish.
The thing that no one wants to admit is that most people want things to happen to them. We tell each other lies about the fight for free will, and independence, but we don't really want that. We want to be told how to live, and then die when we are not looking.
This is the moment where it's as if someone left some dialogue originally written for Blofeld in the script. Safin should be talking about how he's going to kill the type of people that destroyed his life in the past, but instead he's suddenly waxing poetic about free will and how most people are sheep, which was much better suited for our other Blofeld clone, C, in the last movie.
So I made an alliance to put the power where it should be, and now you want to throw it away for the sake of democracy. Whatever the hell that is.
People want oblivion, and a few of us are born to build it for them. So here I am, their invisible god, sneaking under their skin.
Okay, so, he's crazy, I guess? He just wants to kill everybody, right?
We both eradicate people to make the world a better place. I just want to be a little tidier, without collateral.
Oh, no, okay, I guess he wants to just kill bad people, it looks like, without collateral damage, that being good people and children. So it sounds like he's using the weapon exactly how M originally intended it, just on a larger scale, I guess?
That weapon was designed to save lives and to eradicate collateral damage for our agents. A clean, accurate shot every time.
But without knowing the specifics, it's hard to know if Bond is helping or if he's just standing in the way.
What do they want?
Oh, it's hard to say. I mean, I would imagine world leaders, innocent civilians, freedom, you know, that sort of thing.
No good, but just the usual.
Just the usual.
Oh, great. So we're just blatantly rolling with assumptions now, even though we have an actual hard list of targeted individuals. Where's our follow-up scene where Q informs everyone that Safin and company are specifically targeting big-breasted redheads? That'd certainly motivate me to storm his island. But Safin only said he wants to kill bad people just like Bond. After all, Safin literally just eliminated all of Bond's enemies. So for all we know, we're all on the same team here. So far, this is sounding pretty good.
I want the world to evolve, yet you want it to stay the same.
Okay, wait, so now he wants the human race to evolve? Into what? Are we killing bad people or weak people or who are we killing? We need to know who is dying and who is not dying and why so the audience can know who to root for. Remember, MI6 came up with this weapon, so now it comes down to a question of who gets to use the weapon, and I still don't know what Safin plans to do with it that's any different than what MI6 wanted to do with it, other than the same thing on a larger scale. But then all of this gets thrown out the window when a short time later, Safin says,
our first buyers are arriving.
Several high-speed transports are headed towards the island. Origin unknown.
All right, hang on. Safin isn't going to unleash Heracles and kill whoever it is he wants to kill based on his traumatic past, but instead he's going to sell it to unnamed buyers for cash?
In the end, you're just a bank robber. Nothing more than a common thief.
It's nearly impossible to keep up with how messy this bad guy motivation is.
I do wish we just had that little clarification, because I'm like, I just need that. The second part about his character that I feel like just need a clarification or something to wrap my mind around, because it even makes him a little dirtier and disgusting to me if they had done this. Is Safin a groomer pedophile? And why I say that is because he has this whole bit. So what's this point with Madeline? Why does he want Madeline so bad? And the only conclusion I can come to that feels maybe subtle or like off, but they never say it, is that he fell in love with her as she was growing up. I am in love with this girl that I saved, because he's infatuated with the idea that like I saved a life.
And she's like 10, she's 11, she's 12 years old, something like that.
He has the line too about it.
Saving someone's life connects you to them forever. The same as taking it. They belong to you.
And so then later he's holding on to her daughter and he's just like, I have you now. I own you.
Mr. Safin, welcome to your family.
And to reiterate from the last point, that perspective would have made more sense echoed in his scene with Bond if he would have explained that, Bond, all you see is me killing millions, but I am in fact saving millions of other lives.
This plant makes you obey.
This one makes you do as you're told. So you never misbehave.
It makes you do whatever I say you'll do.
Yeah.
The whole time he's very keen on graping
Yeah, he's
this
very
this young
creepy.
girl.
The biggest pedophile statement he had while he's grasping her.
Look at your father, Matilda. This is power.
That's weird.
You guys saying like, yeah, I think that's the case. I think that makes me feel better in like how the villainous the character is, because I do think that might get overlooked by a lot of people as far as like who this character is.
It's overlooked because it's not particularly emphasized. And
Yeah,
that's something that we
and that's what I'm saying. You
to.
emphasize it a little bit more and just at some kind of like scene where he's not like, I'm still in love with you, or some kind of weird obsession with her. Then I'd be like, oh my God, this guy's weird.
But it's all the more odd when Matilda gets away, when she's just like, where's Doo-Doo? And she bites him.
If you don't want my protection, then off you go.
It's just as bad as in Spectre when all of a sudden Madeline's just like, hey, by the way, I'm out.
You're saying goodbye.
Wait, why? Where are you going?
Right.
For comedic value. That is funny, though. Go away.
Yeah,
and
he's
she's
like,
like,
fuck off.
Yep. All right. She just takes off.
I agree with you. I do feel like that scene does feel like, what? It's either at one point they were going along with the idea he was a groomer and he's a pedophile. They do teeter with it. Like, I wish there was just one more scene to be like, okay, I get it now. So what I'm getting at with that biting scene, though, regardless of it being weird and silly that he just lets her go, I get emotional when kids are involved because I have kids, right?
Of course.
But like, I got even more. There's a part of me that got a little emotional in a weird sense where I was like, letting a child go out into the world that is that young and just being like, it's almost like saying like, I'm going to drop you off in the middle of the woods.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna leave, and I'm just gonna leave you there. And you're 3 years old. You're 3 goddamn years old, and what are you gonna do? That to me is kind of scary. That idea scares the shit out of me. I hate that.
See, that's the problem, though, is that, yeah, in real life, that's awful, but this isn't real life. This is a movie. So it's just a stupid, contrived moment. Oh, no. How do we get Madeline back in the hands of Blofeld? I don't know. Screw it. Let's just have her leave all of a sudden. Oh, man. How do we get Matilda back with Bond and Madeline? I don't know. Screw it. How about he just lets her go? I mean, you're clearly emotionally taken by this movie.
It's a good movie. It's the best
it's
movie
like
on this
it may
list.
or may
I don't know
not
what
be
you're talking about.
because whatever. Because
It's so
like your
good.
same
It's the
OHMSS
best
stuff
movie.
with your
it's great.
your wife and kids. You're easily
wife and kids
emotionally
are great.
swayed by stuff. It's
Yeah,
bullshit.
man.
You need
It's
to
the
have a
best stuff.
stronger
Hide those emotions.
It is better than
bond
whatever.
fortitude. You need a stronger bond fortitude.
Right.
Listen, guys. Guys. I can solve all this. Don't worry. I mean, really, the whole point of the movie is just...
Jesus Christ. Dude, fucking Mans just keeps killing everybody. This is ridiculous.
He's in the walls. He's in the goddamn walls.
How the hell are we supposed to rank this fucking movie if Nance keeps killing everybody?
I'm not dying tonight, boys. I'm not dying for this. I'm not dying for this.
I don't know, Scott. I don't think Scott has any plot armor in this. I think he's kind of
Motherfucker kept me alive, tied me in a closet. I have a reason to be here.
I don't know if we're gonna make it. There's no time to die here.
That's really unfortunate that our friend of several decades is dead. Anyway, let's talk about the new 007. Okay. So from the get-go, she acts extremely insecure about the whole thing, right? Like, yeah, that's the thing. It's like, oh, let's have a black woman. Let's have the opposite of James Bond take over the mantle of 007. Let's have it be a black woman.
Yep.
Okay, it works perfectly well because the first time that we meet her is in Jamaica, where she just looks like your average Jamaican citizen.
You know, right?
And then it turns out that she's the new 007.
I'm not just any old 00. I'm 007. You probably thought they'd retire it.
It's just a number.
I like her. I think she's fine. I think it's funny that she's all insecure the whole time.
007? That must bother you.
She is projecting the whole movie. She's like, "Oh, Bond, I bet you don't like that. Oh, you're insecure, aren't you?" But clearly she's the one that's insecure. And I think that a better movie would have developed that and maybe a better movie would have started with her. Like the prologue would have been about her.
Oh, yeah.
And then,
I agree. I do think that would have been cool intro to start with her. So you would have seen Q and M, and they're like kind of what we saw in Tomorrow Never Dies is where they're watching on the screen of them doing the mission.
They keep saying
or even
007. They keep
Skyfall.
saying 007.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden this
007, and then all of a
black
sudden
woman shows up. It's like,
and you're like, wait, that's not 007.
She's 007. You know, sure, that would have been fine.
I think a part of that was because they needed to establish Safin, which was something that I've complained about in a lot of movies lately, is that when they're in a long franchises like that, and you want to create connection with the hero and the villain, and it's been a long franchise, so you have all this gap in history and time. Oh, well, we got to shove in a new character we never talked about prior that was there the whole time or had some previous history. So we just are like delving into a piece of history that we never saw. I just find it kind of sloppy that they do it that way, whatever. But back to 007.
She's very insecure about following in the footsteps of the great 007. And that's something that I think is like a movie unto itself. Like that would have been some good stuff. Every time she brings it up, Bond's like, dude, it's just a number.
It's
like,
just a
I
number.
don't care. But she clearly cares a lot.
He's been reinstated as a 00.
00 what? 00 what?
M says, where's 007? And then we cut to Bond. So as an audience, we're still like, is he talking about the 007 we know? But then the new 007 is there and meets Bond.
Tell him hello, but I don't work for him anymore.
Tell him yourself.
But then M is confused when he speaks to Bond.
007?
M, darling, couple of things.
Bond.
I met your new 007.
He's like 007, and it's Daniel Craig, old 007. As if she wasn't sent there to make contact with him. So it's like, why is she there? Bond had already turned Felix down, but suddenly he changes his mind specifically because new 007 gives him a cell phone to call his old boss, who may or may not have sent Nomi there in the first place. Whether M did so or not, it really doesn't make any sense. Hey Nomi, I need you to go tell your predecessor not to help the Americans find Heracles. If M was that worried about it, he would have just told her to kill him. Or better yet, sleep with him so he'd forget all about it. I understand that assassinating Bond may sound harsh, but Heracles is in fact that important that
If the world knows what this can do, they'd kill for it.
So it would have shown just how far M was willing to go to keep his mess under wraps, especially if M had indeed found out that Bond was working for a foreign government. And as far as new 007's arc goes, how cool would it have been if she was ordered to kill her predecessor, but Bond gets the better of her and has to convince her to help him out and team up to find and destroy Heracles, combining the tropes of Bond's ally and Bond girl into one character that is also his replacement. She's the hothead young 007 that he once was, and now he's the Obi-Wan to her Anakin, trying to teach her how to live long and prosper in the game. That character dynamic practically writes itself and would have been wholly appropriate for an old man Bond story. Instead, we just get more sloppy and contrived screenwriting. Either M ordered her to make contact with Bond even though he didn't know where he was, nor that he had been contacted by the CIA because that hadn't happened yet, or Nomi went of her own accord to stop Bond from doing the thing he already didn't want to do simply because she's that insecure, even though she wouldn't have known where he was either.
How did she know Bond was there when Mallory later told him?
You fell so far off the grid that we thought you must be dead.
So he reappointed you. Did they find him in that time?
Now learning that you were in fact alive and well and working for the CIA. Well, that really was a blow.
Well, they just asked so nicely.
So we have a weird chicken and the egg situation here where we don't know what came first regarding how Nomi found Bond. But what if she was following the CIA boys and that led her to Bond? That actually would have been a fantastic way to bring Bond into the plot, almost by accident. We follow a new 007 around as she spies on Felix Leiter after M informs her that the CIA is interested in this whole Heracles thing. She would watch as they broke into GoldenEye looking for Bond, and then soon after, she'd watch as Bond himself disembarked his boat and met up with Felix. But instead, she's only there to tell him not to do something he already didn't want to do. They could have easily met for the first time in Cuba and then later reveal that she's the new 007. It's definitely nitpicking, but it's just showing how all of this is so horribly contrived.
She threw him the phone.
Yeah, but why is she there? Why is she in Jamaica? She's there to tell him, don't go after scientist guy.
So Valdo Operachev is off limits. You get in my way, I will put a bullet in your knee.
She's not in Cuba to go get scientist guy. She's in Jamaica specifically to tell Bond not to pursue scientist guy because I guess the CIA is there. But then M tells him to stay out of it, right? So it's like M sent her to Jamaica, but then M's confused that he's talking to Bond at all. So they just don't want him to help the CIA. But also, why does the CIA need Bond, right? Why does the CIA need Bond? Like I said before, maybe if the scientist guy insisted that only the great James Bond 007 pick him up, that would make sense. Yeah. But why is new 007 in Jamaica where she should be in Cuba worrying about scientist guy? It seems like a waste of time. Like, this is one of those things that, like, the script is very messy.
I'm here as a professional courtesy.
Why is she there in the first place? And it's like, oh, maybe it's to make contact, and then she gives him the cell phone so he can call M. But then when M talks to Bond, he's confused. He's like, wait, Bond, why am I talking to you and not 007? Like, it makes no sense. It makes no sense.
I think it makes sense.
How does it make sense?
Here's the reason why I think it makes sense. And it's the dumbest thing, honestly. It's just you call someone on a cell phone and it says, oh, I'm getting a call from Charlie. Hey, Charlie. And then it's my grandma. And you're like, Grandma, what the f? That's literally what I think it is.
M should have been expecting it.
So
M should have been expecting M should have said, hey, new 007, I want you to go make contact. And I want you to give him the cell phone, and I want you to make Bond call me.
I literally think that's literally all it was just, it was a phone call thing.
But why? Why does MI6 want to talk to Bond?
Yeah.
Because they just want to tell him, hey, get on, don't do the thing with the CIA. But again, how do they know that too?
They should have tried to assassinate Bond. They should have just killed Bond or something then. Like,
right.
I'm
arguing to you. I'm arguing to you that it's just weird, you know? And I don't think that's a
Wait, guys, hang on. Let's real quick. Let's check in on Patterson. I want to see if he's still dead. Okay.
Oh.
Okay.
I have to finish this. For us.
I know.
At the end, why didn't new 007 finish the mission? Let me paint the picture for you. You have both 007s and Mathilde and Madeline making their way to the sub pen, and they get in a boat. And you would think that in that moment, that new 007 would say, I'm going to go finish the mission. I'm going to open up the doors and everything so that the bombs can come and blow everything up. And that would be when Daniel Craig 007 says, no, I'll do it. And she says, no, your family's right here.
I've got them. This might come in handy.
Thank you.
But instead, it's just understood that James Bond is going to do it. How noble would it have been? It would have been great if she would have at least offered. She's like, Bond, you and your family should get in this boat and go to safety, right? But she doesn't even offer. It's just understood that James Bond is going to complete the mission. And I'm like, okay, he's old and he's the father of this child and the lover of this woman. She should have at least offered to sacrifice herself because she's the young 007, but instead it's just understood that she's gonna usher his baby girl and his wife, boo, to the rocks. And I'm like, what? Come on.
We're coming back to the same insecurity she's had this entire time.
If Bond does anything weird in there, you'll be doing me a huge favor, so don't make it too easy for him.
She's following in his footsteps the whole time. She knows it.
To be fair, Commander Bond gave me the lead.
Well, I'm glad to see you two getting along.
She starts to realize that she can't do it.
I'm saying, though, that a better movie would have at least had her offer. And Bond's like, I get it. I have to do it.
I'm giving you a counter argument.
It never even came up. Because, if new 007 has any kind of clout, she's like, I will sacrifice myself for you. And then Bond's like, no.
But she gave up her clout. She said, permission to reinstate Bond at 007 status.
Permission for Commander Bond to be redesignated as 007. It's just a number.
Very well.
I felt like that was one of the weird, silly things that didn't make any sense to the movie. It was just like, hey, let's pause the movie real quick. I want to reinstate. But I can see where the writers made it. I see where the writers made
it was appropriate for her to do that.
Right. But it just felt like a weird time, and I do feel like it felt like the movie was trying to just be like, hey, let's settle our differences. Like the smarter movie would have developed that a little bit more, right?
Yes. The smarter movie would have been just the two of them the whole time dealing with it, and then eventually she relents. So yes, I agree with that. This whole movie is rushed. The whole movie is move on, move on, move on, move on.
Move on, move on. There's the other thing I wanted to talk about her though was, and this was something early on in another reference to another film, was The Spy Who Loved Me. Because the one thing I liked about The Spy Who Loved Me, and I think that makes it a good film, is it's not just James Bond doing James Bond things. It's James Bond having to compete with Agent XXX from Russia to have to like save the world essentially. And I love the idea of Bond teaming up with somebody else who's kind of maybe a different nation or whatever, and having to do the same things or have to be on the same team. So when we get to the end of the movie and they're like killing all these bad guys together, I'm like, I'm on board with this. But I love them competing early on where like they're trying to both get the MacGuffin.
May I cut in?
And then there's no sexual intercourse.
There's a moment when they go back to Goldeneye.
Is that the bedroom?
And they get into the bedroom. I really am buying the fact that like Bond's like, okay, we're going to go sleep together. All right, I'm going to take a drink. Like I'm buying all of this. So I'm like, okay, I could totally see them getting it on. And then all of a sudden she pulls the rug out from under him.
Well, that's not the first thing I thought you'd take off, but...
Yeah. You seem like a man who's gagging for some action, Mr. Bond.
I actually liked that moment, and it at least had some kind of like, there was something there. There's also another little like weird moment, the boat moment that you're talking about, Charlie, when Bond is embracing Swan, when they're like kissing and hugging. She kind of like gives a look, and the way I read that look was almost like, is she giving that look like I'm jealous, like, oh, that was the thing I could have had? That's just my head. I guess that's just more my headcanon. But I did read that, and I'm like, was that in a script? Was that her intention when she played the scene that way? I don't know, but it did leave an impression on me as I was watching the edit. I'm like, that's such a kind of
I still
specific
think it's
weird
more
thing.
Envy for the
I mean,
position.
and you could be right there too.
If you're gonna build up a character that is insecure, you know the scene where they're walking through MI6 and everybody's saying 007, 007? And she's like, that must bother you, right? You know what would have helped that would have been a previous scene that would have showed the new 007, and everybody's like, oh, you're not as cool as the old 007. Oh, I remember the old 007. He f***ed me real good one night. He was such a good lover. Oh, remember how many times he saved the world? Oh, you're the new 007, and you're not as cool. Oh, you ate my sandwich out of the fridge. Like, oh, you're a butthole 007.
Yes.
Like, that would have added to it. Like, again, if the opening mission would have been new 007 failing to protect Heracles or something, that would have been great. But this movie doesn't have the time to develop that character. This movie is move on, move on, move on.
There are two individual scenes you're missing here. She sits down with Moneypenny and says,
I get why you shot him.
because, well, everybody shoots
That's
at
a
him
cute
once.
moment. That's a cute moment.
Yeah, I like that
Two, she's
What's your point? What's your point with that scene? What's your point with that scene?
Hold on, shut up. She's standing in the interrogation room.
I hope Nance comes and murders you soon.
Yeah, dude.
Good. She's standing in the interrogation room. Does he have this effect on all women?
That's a weird moment.
Does he have that effect on all women?
50-50. It's unpredictable.
Yeah.
That's a weird moment.
I'm sorry.
It's 50-50. No, it's not 50-50 with Bond. The whole point that the reason you employ James Bond is that he doesn't have a 50-50 effect with women.
But
he has a 100%. He has a 100% 10 out of 10 rate with women. Bond is paid by the government to sleep with women for information. So to say that it works 50% of the time is stupid. You wouldn't hire the guy if his effective rate was 50%. That is definitively stupid. And the weird thing about that scene too,
ignoring for a moment the fact that she didn't want to infect Bond with the Heracles she just sprayed herself with.
Do they not understand that he used to have a relationship with Madeline Swan that didn't go well? If Madeline Swan had never met Bond, she would have been like, hey. And then that would have been like, oh, that's Bond being Bond. He's seductive to women.
I'm
like
to
say it's 50-50 makes no fucking sense.
McCurdy, I feel for you, man, talking to this guy. No, coming back to it again.
This is a weird situation where I'm on Charlie's side. I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of this movie that feels like you could, like, Charlie, I think you could do a fan edit of this movie and you could trim like little pieces here and there and then get AI to like throw in the dialogue that you could do. You know, like
Wait.
like in one of those sequences,
Wait, me or film hacker?
Yeah, who are we talking about?
Well,
who are you talking about?
I don't know.
She is living in his shadow, and she knows she is.
Need a ride?
Where have you been?
Chasing after your lead.
The entire time.
Yeah.
And so, that leads to the end, where, bringing it back to where Charlie said, oh man, it'd be great if she said, no, Bond, I'll take the rifle, charge into the base and kill everybody. She said, no, I can't do it.
No, she never. No, I'm saying that was never even an option. She should have offered that. She should have been like, Bond, you take your family and go. Fine. And Bond's like, no, I need to finish this. But she never even offered. It was just understood that the women and children were going to leave and that Bond, as the man, was going to go save the world, even though he's got the most to lose. The new 007 doesn't have a boyfriend or a husband or a kid.
So let me ask you, Charlie, in an actual world scenario, would you stand up and take that rifle?
Me?
Yeah, for somebody else's hidden daughter.
Yes, what you're laying out is, should the person with the least amount to lose, should they sacrifice the most? Yeah, of course. Me,
hopefully.
I don't have a Madeline, nor do I have a Matilde. So
No,
yes. Yes, like if it was between McCurdy and I, I'd be like, McCurdy, you take your wife and kids,
That's
get
all I
on the
wanna do.
boat and go save them, and I'll open the doors so that the whole island is destroyed. But if that's the movie, McCurdy's the one going in and sacrificing himself, and I'm like,
I guess I'll like go on this island with your wife and kids and I'll be daddy now.
and it's just like, no, that's not how this works. Like, I should go do that.
Yeah.
And McCurdy should leave.
I get it. Okay.
She didn't even offer. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's what I mean. Because the movie is move on, move on, move on.
Yeah, the only thing I could add to that is just saying that, like, I think it goes at least back to, we've talked about James Bond has always been about king and country, and he's doing the right thing for the rest of the world. So I think that's where that motivation would come through, at least that character. But what
her
you're talking
too,
about with but
new
yeah, she
007 should have the same philosophy.
Exactly, but she's
But
not.
they don't.
She's not James Bond. So
she
I'm
didn't even
agreeing with
offer
Charlie.
it.
I'm agreeing with you.
The Titanic was sinking, and the women
she
and
never
children
said
got in the
anything.
lifeboat, and James Bond was like, I guess I'll go down with the ship. On that note, let's talk about Anna de Armpit again. So her whole thing is we're subverting expectations. Expectations are subverted when it comes to Anna de Armpit, because the whole thing is she's like, look, I'm like ditzy, and like, oh my god, I guess when I'm nervous I forget things, and like, oh, I
and
don't,
then she's one-handing a 9mm fully automatic rifle.
She has an entire movie's worth of character arc in a short sequence.
Mhm.
And that's the bad screenwriting. That's where the cucks and all the idiots come out of the woodwork to be like, well, she's hot and I love her so much. And I'm like, yes, but if you love her so much, don't you think there should be more of her? Don't you think that she should be spread throughout the whole movie as opposed to just having an entire character's character arc in
She should
5
be.
minutes?
She should be what? She should be spread.
Yeah,
She should be spread eagle across this whole movie. So because remember, the first thing that we see, the very first thing we see is that she forgets the code word exchange.
Something about a hat, Paris.
What hat? Ay, colleague. See. I forget things when I get nervous. This is the biggest job I've ever had.
Yeah, Paris and something. Yeah, whatever.
But also, so does Bond, right? Bond walks in and Bond addresses her by name.
Paloma?
And she turns and she's like, hey, let's go. And Bond's like, weren't you... Like my point being that the proper old school thing would have been that Bond approaches and Bond says, hey, springtime in Cuba is rainy. You know, and then she says, that's why I wear a hat. That's what it would have been. But instead, Bond walks up and just says, Paloma? Like literally addresses her by name. And then he gives her shit for not remembering the code word or the code phrase. And I'm like, yeah, but you did too, Bond. Like, this whole
Can I add more to that shit sandwich that you've just displayed to me? That I'm like, but wait, there's more.
But wait, there's more.
I think if there's one big negative thing about this movie, again, it's the Cuba sequence is the part of the movie that I think it just goes completely off the rails.
Just
but
like
it does
Die
come
Another
back.
Day. Die Another Day.
and No Time to Die nosedive into Cuba.
Cuba. You love it there. Oh, I love it there.
If you're making a Bond movie, don't go to Cuba.
Yeah, don't go to Cuba. For some reason, there's something in the water there.
Little kids peeing in it. That's why I eat the peppers.
It would have been great if they kind of played where she's being the prim and proper agent because she's only been doing it for 3 weeks or whatever it is.
In London, April's a spring month.
Oh, yeah? What are you, the weatherman?
And she's the one who's like, you know, saying all this. And then he's like, okay, come on, let's just go. Or you flip it where she forgets. And then he's like, hold on. Ed said something to her about like giving her a little more shit about it and been like, yo, you need to like tighten your shit up. That would have been better. I think that would have worked better. It would have been cleaner, a little more on book as to what Bond is.
Can I borrow a match?
I use a lighter.
It's better still.
Until they go wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah, a moment like that where he kind of schools her would have made their lame handshake a little easier to swallow, showing that Bond is the older, wiser agent taking her under his wing instead of under his sheets. But overall, Paloma's whole presence in the movie is nothing more than an over-the-top joke that you see coming a mile away and that really isn't that funny or interesting in a movie you're supposed to take seriously. At first, she's like, oh my God, I'm so nervous and I'm gonna mess this up. And then it's
And
like,
why-
what? And it's like, oh my God, you're actually
Why
really
does
badass.
she start
and it's like,
undressing him?
Don't you think we ought to get to know each other just a little bit before we,
Oh, no. No, I'm sorry. You do it.
Thank you.
I'm nervous. Let me take your shirt off.
I'm extremely cynical about the whole thing because we talked about this in the last episode where you had a really sexy woman come in as a Bond girl, but she's not a Bond girl because she's only in the movie for like 5 seconds. And then you have the same thing here. You have a woman who's like, let's take the sexiest woman on the planet and let's pretend she's a Bond girl, but Bond's not going to have sex with her. I'm not in the camp where Bond has to have sex with her. I'm not going to be that guy that's like, he should have banged her. Why didn't he bang her? But at the same time, there should at least be enough time with her to make her a Bond girl. I went on and on about the redhead from Moonraker. She might be one of the most attractive women in the Bondverse, but she's not a Bond girl. She doesn't count as a Bond girl. She's a sexy woman in a Bond movie, but like to be a Bond girl, you need to at least have some kind of position in that story. And the last 2 movies have done the same thing where they try to have it both ways. It's like, let's bring a woman in to be that, to be a sexy woman in a Bond movie, but they don't have them do anything. And she has an entire character arc in 5 minutes. I'm the new agent and I don't know what I'm doing. Oh, psych. I know exactly what I'm doing and I actually kick ass and then cut. You never see me again. The requirements for a Bond girl should at least span more than a simple sequence.
But
otherwise,
she
it's
does
just
make
cheap.
mention of that at the end. Here's a cigar.
Very convenient.
To Felix. Remind me to get him a cigar.
Hey, a cigar for Felix.
Thank you.
Again, move on. Just patch everything and keep moving.
Charlie, I agree with you in that I still would categorize her
I
as a
agree.
Bond girl just for the sake of being like, because she's a name actress and you're like, oh yeah, she's in this movie, yada yada. But as far as like, if we're just saying like Bond girl as like the similar exact tropes of what a Bond girl would do, it's like she's there and then she's gone. And it's a very awkward handshake thing that I felt like you take that out or you kill her. You do something else with that character other than the way that they end things with that. It's just weird. It does feel like a backdoor pilot for another movie. Like that's what that sequence feels like.
It was such an honor working with you. Wow. It's so clinical.
It's
and
so
again,
weird.
It's like it goes back to every Bond movie where we talk specifically about how Bond ceases to act like Bond. And we've already said that. We've said like Daniel Craig he's not behaving like James Bond in this. He's behaving like somebody else entirely. And that's why I don't get James Bond vibes from it. And at least he hits on her for a bit. But then when they part ways, it's like, some people might say, well, he should have just paused the movie to have sex with her right there. And I'm like, no. That would have been inappropriate because they were on a deadline. What would have been more appropriate is to keep her in the movie for a while. Bring her back, and then even if they never had sex, at least have her there so that she's a significant part. but her whole part in the movie ends up being nothing more than basically a cameo. So imagine this. Paloma flies to the boat with Bond, and when we get there, it's revealed that Paloma wasn't interested in Bond because it turns out that she's Felix's wife, boo.
I want to get back to my family, tell them I saved the world again.
Just imagine the look on Bond's face when this perfect 10 runs into the open arms of his best buddy. Maybe she's the reason that Felix is so damn happy in this movie after being so dour in the previous films.
It's a good lie.
But then Logan Ash betrays and kills him, so Paloma joins up with Bond to get some revenge on both Logan Ash and Safin. But instead, she leaves just as she's getting started. That's where I say they're trying to have it both ways. We're going to have a really, like the hottest woman on the planet today. We're going to bring her in so we can put her on the poster to promote the movie. But Bond's never going to get anywhere near her titties or her butthole, because that will upset the feminists. So we're going to please everybody. But by trying to please everybody, you please nobody. You end up just having an empty storyline.
Yeah, and if she had been more into the story and like followed him and went with the boat and everything else, I mean, you could have had her end there, you know, like when they get to the boat.
Hey, we could have had a callback to like, what was it, the first 3 or 4 movies where he has sex on a boat or a life raft?
Yeah, the two of them on the life raft, and it's like how are we gonna fill our time on this life raft? And then they get rescued by that big boat, and then they don't get to have sex. And Bond's like, damn it. And then they move on. All right, members' comments. We got Toph. Toph says, pros for No Time to Die. The action, especially in the pre-title sequence. The attack on the MI6 research lab, Cuba, and Sweden. Eon Productions having the good sense to read the room and tone down Nomi's character and her relationship to Bond and the title of 007. The humor, while it occasionally strays into Fleabag awkwardness, several lines of the dialogue made me audibly laugh.
I have something to show you.
Another child?
You can go in.
Thank you.
Alone, I'm afraid.
Oh, does that bother you?
The locations, from Matera to Bond's sweet bachelor pad and Safin's lair. I like the Mad-Eye Moody henchman, reminded me of GoldenEye Rogue Agent. Yeah, GoldenEye Rogue Agent, of course.
There you go.
Felix's death. When I saw this for the first time, it felt like a canary in the coal mine for what was to come.
I'll be over here.
You know, Felix, we really need to stop meeting.
And the build-up in the ship was well executed. Cons for No Time to Die. Bond's death is contrived. It requires too many leaps in logic to work, such as Mr. One-Man Army being blindsided by Safin with a gun after plot armoring through the entire third act action scene. The need for the island to be destroyed immediately.
Several high-speed transports are headed towards the island.
I've got the Navy, the Japanese, the Russians, all breathing down my neck, demanding to know why we've got a C-17 circling a disputed island.
Yeah, they just kind of vaguely hint at the idea that other countries and these unknown buyer ships are going to get their hands on Heracles if they don't blow it up 5 minutes from now.
We are going to need an immediate strike on this location. This whole island is a manufacturing plant for Heracles.
Our uninvited guests are 15 minutes away.
The situation is diplomatically complex.
We don't have a choice. Fire on my mark.
If we launch, the Russians, the Japanese, and even the Americans will want answers.
Well, don't give them any.
I'm trying to save this from escalating to all-out war.
Mallory, if we don't do this, there will be nothing left to save.
But once Bond preps the base for destruction and kills Safin, it appears as though anyone on the island that was a threat is already dead anyway. So how could Heracles be released? How is it going to be released anyway? By these anonymous buyers? Let's do something about them then. If Safin was planning to launch some Heracles dispersal rocket, I could understand the rush, but otherwise you're on a secluded island. Heracles isn't going anywhere. All of this ticking clock business would make way more sense if Japan, Russia, and the Americans were all sending troops to investigate the island, and MI6 was concerned that once they find Heracles, they'll want to keep it. Further fleshing out the theme that nobody could or should be in charge of something this powerful. But that's not the concern here. M is trying to avoid war because they have Q flying around in a plane that they could just as well call off because clearly Bond doesn't need his help.
So it's going to be an overly complicated and intricate switching system. Now, the order in which you engage it will need to be extremely precise.
You're looking for a control panel. There should be a counterweight clutch. So listen very carefully, 007. First thing you need to do.
And Q is concerned about these random buyer ships showing up.
Several unidentified ships are headed your way.
They're coming after Heracles.
Which would obviously take a while to load up with Heracles anyway.
It will not fit in a suitcase this time.
But either way, it seems like we have a little bit of time here. Let's all just catch our breath and think before we rush into an obvious look out! This entire ending perfectly embodies what I've been saying all along, that this movie very purposely moves as fast as possible to prevent the viewer from asking any questions about what's going on.
If we only had more time.
And the idea that Heracles is immortal and cannot be removed, destroyed, or contained despite him having an EMP watch. Exactly. Blofeld dies off screen. He might as well have offered Bond a delicatessen in stainless steel.
I buy you a delicatessen!
Ana de Armas's character must have trained at the same dojo that Lieutenant Hip's nieces did. The stupid Borat scientist.
Wow.
Safin, I don't know what they were going for with his character, which is a shame because I think he had excellent potential. It seems the writers were stuck between making him a maniac on par with Stromberg, who just wants to reduce the population of the Earth to fertilizer, which would have been stupid for a final boss for Craig's Bond, and making him a sympathetic villain who is pursuing justice by any means necessary. I seriously wish it was the latter, considering the weapon is basically the Bond equivalent of a Death Note.
It's an anime show. Characters can write their names, and then that person, there's a mysterious monster thing that kills them.
Okay.
Makes
a
sense.
lower tier film for me, below Quantum, in fact, but above Octopussy. Wow. Okay.
Swear I had it.
Spectre Chair Engineer says, just wanted to say thanks for making this series. You made some real insightful analysis, and I've enjoyed watching every episode. Thank you, sir. Happy to do it.
Toast to him. Toast to
Yeah.
him.
Yeah.
Who was that?
Spectre Chair Engineer.
Spectre Chair
Spectre Chair Engineer. Toast to you, sir.
Cheers.
And toast to everybody who's died this episode.
Yeah, man.
Hopefully we all make it. Anyway, he says, anyway, I really hate this movie. I'm sure your discussion will focus on the ending, but I feel compelled to point out how much M sucks in this movie. They made him a moody dumbass who acts like an asshole to everyone, not to mention his Heracles project is infinitely more evil than Blofeld's plot in the previous film, and most other villains in the series. Sanchez and Green look like choir boys in comparison to what M did here. I'm going to go ahead and assume that by Sanchez he meant Silva, and I don't think that was intentional. This ranks dead last for me.
Damn.
Bond having a pitiful memorial service with only Moneypenny and a few others in attendance is a taunt from 006, not a fitting ending for the character. Now, that I will contend with, because when he says 006, he means Alec Trevelyan. When Alec Trevelyan says...
Mr. Bond here will have a small memorial service, with only Moneypenny and a few tearful restaurateurs in attendance.
He is simply pointing out a fact, which is that when a 00 dies, they don't get recognition in the media, or, you know, they don't have this, like, extravagant funeral. They just have a small service, basically an MI6, and then an anonymous star is put on the wall.
No longer just an anonymous star on the memorial wall at MI6.
Which is a reference to the way the CIA honor their fallen, but they changed that canon, of course, with the Craig movies. They made it that your name is on a wall in MI6. But he's pointing out a fact. So then to see that fact in reality, it doesn't mean the bad guys win. It's just that's what happens when a 00 dies, is that a few people say a prayer and take a drink.
I shall not waste my days trying to prolong them. I shall use my time.
Which, by the way, everyone immediately drinks, but M pulls a think and drink. It's one of my all-time favorite movie tropes, or rather acting tropes. You see it all the time. A character goes to take a drink, but they pause, think for a beat, and then drink. I just love it. But anyway, having a parade where Bond's body is being, you know, carted through London would counteract everything I've always said. Bond shouldn't be a public figure. He should live in the shadows, you know, so.
James Bond?
Yeah.
That goes back to that
killed
tracing.
James
Killed
Bond.
James Bond?
K1 says, it would seem there is an overabundance of time to die. Intro scene was okay, probably best part of the movie, but sets the tone for mopey, weepy Bond. Everything else sucked hard. Intro song sucked. Worst song in the series, and the visuals of Bond's history and legacy in ruins was appropriate. That's funny. If you're familiar with the first Metal Gear Solid game, there are more than a few similarities, mostly with the nanomachine. Didn't you guys say this? The nanomachine virus.
We did mention this.
Killing Blofeld and all of Spectre felt like a waste after 40 years of trying to get the rights back. That's funny. Cuba scene is very overrated. The gunfights of this movie are just henchmen running in front of Bond to fall over. Yeah, that's true. Bond's daughter is lame as f***. He should have made a milk run the second he saw her. Don't f***ing kill Bond. The f***ing bad guy's name is Lucifer Satan. Yes. God, this movie f***ing sucks. Okay, K1
Bond's daughter is lame.
Yeah. He should have made a milk run the second he saw her. That means does that mean
hey,
go for milk and never come home?
Why is his daughter a little bitch? She's a child. Why is she? Yes, she is a little bitch.
She's obsessed with a thing called doo-doo.
Yes,
she sucks balls.
She's a child.
So K1 didn't like
whatever.
She should have picked up a gun and shot somebody like her mom did.
Kill everything.
The Entertainer says, I often return to OHMSS in my reviews of Bond, in part because it's my favorite of the series, but primarily due to how many later films turn to its portrayal of Bond as more human and vulnerable for character development. Most people who dislike No Time to Die seem to take issue particularly with Bond's vulnerability and death. The film is a mirror of OHMSS, with Madeline and Mathilde riding off into the sunset on a similar road to the one where Tracy died. But while it dutifully pays homage, it also commits one of my cardinal sins in cinema, making the viewer think of a better film than the one they are currently watching. No Time to Die is tied not just to OHMSS, but also to Craig's debut, Casino Royale, and especially Spectre, to the extent that its own story becomes an afterthought. We don't get to know the villains or his motives, and while the story is primarily about Bond and his family, we barely have time for them either. Bond dying for the sake of his family isn't a bad story, but despite the overlong runtime, there's not enough space for that story to be told. Bond truly did not have time to die. However, unlike Spectre, this film is quite exciting and enjoyable. Again, it's definitely above Spectre. And while the story is flawed, it provides some sense of investment. The opening sequence is one of the best in a long time. It's a blend of excellently coordinated action with engaging character moments, which is a formula that returns throughout the film. Cuba,
Salute.
The Norway car chase,
Nice moves, Bond.
and the climax. It works more like a series of spectacular vignettes rather than telling a great overarching story. For me, the purpose of Bond has always been to tell a great story, but maybe not a story about the man himself. GoldenEye certainly proved that Bond still matters, but in the sphere of popular culture, not as a human being. Goldfinger, on the other hand, tells a great story through atmosphere, with Connery's portrayal of Bond as its primary vehicle. While OHMSS is a personal story for Bond, and more effectively so than No Time to Die, it also serves as a vehicle for the set pieces, and I similarly favor it for its atmosphere through cinematography, music, and sense of space. No Time to Die unfortunately fails to strike a similar balance. While No Time to Die might not stand the test of time as the profound Bond movie it tries to be, it's engaging, and with some of the best action in the series, I rank it at number 16, right below the Thunderball threshold. So, those comments are like, it's but
it's not complete.
The Entertainer is saying kind of what we said. It's like he said below Thunderball, we're saying below Tomorrow Never Dies. It's definitely on the bottom of the list, but just how far down do you put it because of how rushed it is? And the thing that you have to give it props for is that it is a series ender.
Yeah.
Everybody in attendance here agrees. Everybody who hasn't been killed by Nans agrees that the movie is at least better than You Only Live Twice for how emotionally, like the emotional punch it has, right? You Only Live Twice. It's a decent Bond movie, but it's so lackluster. This at least, even if you're just looking at that ending, this movie deserves some credit in that arena, right? But you can punch holes in it throughout. I mean, it's like, I can't put it any better than I did in my opener, where it's like, move on, move on, move on, move on. But then when we get to the ending, we really milk the death of Bond. That's enough for me to go, okay, it's better than You Only Live Twice.
Right.
But everything else is in question.
Here's why I'm like still in that above Octopussy bandwagon right now. Because I think Octopussy, even like looking at some of the movies in that realm, right? Octopussy, Living Daylights, I just felt the villains were very kind of forgettable. And as much as Safin's plans are not quite clear, he's memorable enough that leaves me with an impression that I'm like, yeah, I can. And his plan or whatever he's doing is probably more dastardly than a lot of other Bond villains. With Octopussy, the villains are kind of like, who? Like, I'm like, who are these? Kamala Khan and some Russian general.
Kamala Khan, he's a classy Bond bad guy, though. You could poke a million holes in his scheme, but he actually is intelligent, and he actually knows what he's trying to accomplish. And same with the Russian general. This movie, once you get to that moment where it's like, oh, we're going to sit down with Safin, and we're going to find out what his worldview is. His worldview is literally like, people want to be dead. You're like, what? What are you talking about? Yeah, people want to be dead, and I'm going to help them be dead. Okay. Why? Who are you trying to kill, Safin? I get that you wanted to kill Spectre. Everything was good up until then. But then after that, for some reason, you don't provide any insight into why you're killing millions of people, potentially billions of people worldwide. Who's going to die and who's not going to die?
I still think regardless of that, I think when you look at the plans for Octopussy versus the plan in this movie, I just feel like they're just almost as equally ridiculous. Like they're just like, there are a million holes in both of these plans. And it's like startling and it's just like, yikes.
But all those other movies are simpler. You want to rank it too high, okay?
Guys.
What?
I'm going to be honest with you two. You are the two most annoying people to argue with. Here's where I'm at. I have the perfect point that will make this movie a higher rank. Wait.
Damn it. Now fucking Scott's dead too.
Oh man.
Jesus Christ.
What are we going to do? We're never going to get this rank right.
McCurdy, everybody's dead except us. Okay. Where the do we rank this movie then?
I will call it a day if we put it above Die Another Day. How about that?
Let's talk about that.
So why do you not want to put it above Die Another Day?
As I said before, every scene feels like it's written by someone new. Like a game of screenwriting telephone. As an example, Madeline has that scene where it's like, have her go drink some tea.
Perhaps we should have some tea. Make her see the light.
No, you can't separate us!
And then she's like, this tea that I've never seen before, but you just put in front of me, it'll blind you.
Do you know what this flower does? It makes you blind.
If I threw this tea in your face, it would blind you.
Yeah.
And so he leans in and she throws it in his face.
Yeah.
But then also he comes back later and he's fine. He's not blind. He's fighting Bond just fine with his one eye or like his two eyes.
My general thing with this script, between the action sequences in this movie, the at least Spectre and all the other movies for whatever, but with the Madeline daughter, all that, like those core things in the story, I actually really think rise above everything else in the movie outside of the convoluted plot and stuff. And I will more be on board with like a story of emotionality than I'm gonna be on with something with a little more like, oh, it's just action movie for sake of action movie. And that's what I feel about Die Another Day. Is I feel like Die Another Day is a lot of just action movie shit. And I can already read you ahead here where you're like, well, but remember that villain's motivations are pretty clear and he is fun. I see that, but at the end of the day, I'm also like, I will gravitate more towards Bond's heartbreak, Bond finding out he has a daughter, and the complications of that. Because I even love just that little tiny scene we get of him carving the apple and handing it to her. It's just like, I love that stuff.
At that point, would you put it above Diamonds Are Forever based on the same logic?
I might. Because I could see, like, I'm in the realm of like, because Diamonds Are Forever is the movie that doesn't give a shit, that does do some wacky bullshit. Just wacky, like
the movie
things that we were
knows what
talking
it
about.
is from beginning to end.
It does wacky
This
bullshit.
movie doesn't really know what it is from beginning to end.
True.
Again, the big problem with Die Another Day is that it starts one way and it ends another. That's the problem with it. Diamonds Are Forever knows what it is from beginning to end. That's why they are what they are.
Right. In that realm, it's like, yeah, I think there's some matchup to be had. But again, I'm going to go towards beautiful story over general plotty action stuff. And even the plotty action stuff, as much as it's convoluted and like has some really weird flaws in it. Why is Cyclops a Safin supporter, but he was part of Spectre? The action still is just generally better than most of the Bond films. And then again, I know you just said it was the ending, but I'm also going to say it's not just the ending. Like a lot of people even pointed out in our comments, is like that beginning is very strong too. And I think with a strong beginning and a strong end, at least it's like maybe it has a really bad, it's a little saggy, but and that's probably part of the reason why it's at the bottom. But I would put it maybe above Diamonds Are Forever because of that. But I don't think it goes above Moonraker, because even though Moonraker is the point where they pretty much lost their way in what was James Bond because they were chasing trends too much. It's kind of what this movie does, honestly. Like, all the pandering things that you complain about with this movie, in a way, it's like the updated version where like...
Put in the femme-powered character that Bond doesn't bang, take a main character and make him gay out of nowhere and never address it, so we can put out PR statements saying,
whatever,
Bond is progressive. As usual, this is where I get in trouble, because as we've learned from this whole experiment, the moment you criticize something, people go right to the extreme that you hate that thing. For example, if I as a man criticize a woman, most people don't see beyond the optics of a man expressing something negative about a woman. Therefore, that guy, me, must hate women.
And I'm not as big as Gunther. I think you're a little more emotional about the fact that a woman and a man are fighting and she beats him.
But that's
no, that is what it is. That is what it is. And you think that is stupid.
Yeah,
but that is what it is. You are too emotional about a man and a woman fighting and a woman beating a man. She's not only
smart. She's not a bodybuilder. She's fucking smart.
She's a capable
She didn't
driver.
run Gunther over with a car. She brutalized him in a fight, which is stupid. That's insulting to her character. Her character isn't a fucking brute. Her character is being really fucking street smart. She could have done something smart. Use her brain to kill him.
You just don't think
literally
that women
throw
could
him
kick
into a
guy's
wall.
ass.
She literally throws him.
Think that a woman could kick a guy's ass.
This is the progressive mindset that anybody can do anything, but for that to work within a story, it has to be believable. It has to be set up. Otherwise, it's using the mask of progress to cover blatantly lazy writing. I don't blink an eye when Nomi does some awesome spy stuff because she's a 00. You don't get to 00 status without being awesome. And it's not like she doesn't earn her stripes. But so is Bond, and even he has his physical limitations. Every single time James Bond has fought someone bigger than him, he's had to do something creative in order to compensate. Something that actually takes some effort to dream up and execute on a filmmaking level. But if I'm being completely honest, I don't really even blink an eye when Paloma does awesome stuff either, because I understand that it's all tongue-in-cheek.
This is going to go brilliantly.
I know. I've done 3 weeks training.
3 weeks training?
Really?
More or less.
If Paloma was in Die Another Day, I would have loved her. But in a movie that I'm supposed to take seriously, she's just there for the brain-dead pandas. The irony is that these same kind of people claim to champion equality, and yet they are programmed to think women are beyond reproach, which is the opposite of equality. Such people are easily panda'd. You put a hot chick on screen and she flips around while being hot and acting tough with zero substance to her otherwise in a movie you're supposed to take seriously, and I see it for what it is. People abiding obvious laziness and uncreativity because they're too scared to be labeled a bigot in today's retarded-ass social climate while also kind of being a simp. It's very easy to pull off this big dumb action stuff, especially in a single sequence. It's much more difficult to craft a character with some actual strength over the course of a whole film. Vesper never threw a single punch in her entire movie, and yet the turmoil she went through makes her a significantly stronger character than this cartoonish Paloma will ever be. And the filmmakers pulled this off with setup and payoff, the very essence of what makes storytelling effective. But when it comes to Tracy Bond, they didn't just fail to set her up as a fighter, they actively set her up as a physically weak person who doesn't deserve a fight scene. It's as lazy as giving someone like Boris a fight scene, or Lashif. It just doesn't work and undermines their pre-established character. Can you imagine Boris dying by way of some stupid, predictable fight scene versus the classic and wholly original?
Yes! I am invincible!
And just like not every character is worthy of a fight scene, not every character can be made gay. My problem with it isn't that Q is gay per se, but that without there being anything more than simply removing a single letter from the original script,
He'll be here in 20 minutes.
it was obviously done solely for clout without actually doing anything at all, really, and that's what bugs me. And I'm not the only one that feels that way. The Q actor, Ben Whishaw, who is gay in real life, admitted that it was a bad move. And I feel bad for the guy, because in all honesty, he probably felt taken advantage of, which he was. They flaunted his sexuality for 0.5 seconds simply for PR purposes because they think it'll sell more tickets to a modern progressive audience. But while it may get that audience to woo for a brief moment, as a Bond fan, it's just insulting and cheap. But before you accuse me of hate again, let's explore why. We've had gay characters before and none of us ever bat an eye. I mean, hell, for all we knew, Desmond Llewellyn's Q was gay the entire time and nobody knew it because that's his private life and his sexuality wasn't ever relevant, you know, other than that time he was gang f***ed by a bunch of octopuses.
Oh, cut it out. We haven't time for that. Later, perhaps.
As opposed to Bond, whose sexuality is exclusively relevant. Sex is just as, if not more important than any gadget Bond has ever utilized. I've even stated previously that if Bond had to bang a guy to save the world, he'd probably snore to Cialis and do it.
On a mission, I am expected to sacrifice myself.
The only ancillary character whose sexuality ever mattered in Bond's world was Moneypenny, and for obvious reasons, because she was always yearning for Bond's wedding bed. Remember though, she isn't just another Bond girl for 007 to conquer, but rather represents that eternally present backup plan for trading in his extravagantly short-lived life as a spy for a comfortably boring normal home life. A dynamic that elevated Moneypenny beyond the simple role of just being the secretary to Basil Exposition. MQ, their home life never came into it, mostly because, like Bond, these guys are married to the job. M gave the orders and Q mastered the quarter that facilitated executing those orders. I understand why between these two possible options of regulars, they went with Q for the gay status, because he's the more eccentric of the two, but what I know for sure and what I'm certain the writers figured out as soon as they made that decision was that there's literally nothing you can do with it other than have Q be attracted to Bond for the obvious reason that 99% of the time Q shares the screen with Bond and Bond happens to be a very attractive man, so if you're going to inject sexuality into the mix, 2 + 2 = Q being attracted to Bond. Think about it, what else is there? It's not like gender flipping or race swapping, which is all optics. If Q was black or a woman, we would see it right away. Boom, that's all the work that needs to be done. But you make a character gay, okay, now how are you going to express that without seeing it in action or representing it visually in a stereotypical way that would offend the pandas? Our interpretation of the Moneypenny VR scene in Die Another Day, where Moneypenny is engaged in a simulation programmed by R, in which James Bond comes into into the room and bangs you, as if R secretly programmed that for himself because he's secretly gay, makes way more use of someone's homosexuality than this movie ever does. But the filmmakers would want to avoid that because it would only ever be played for laughs, which would easily offend the Pandas, trapping them in a stupid and forced scene where Q has to cancel a date because Bond shows up. I can already anticipate a comment saying something like, gay characters can't be taken seriously, they're just there for laughs like a clown or something. The answer is neither yes nor no, because that's a very broad question. What simplifies it in this instance is that we're talking about a very specific character with a very simple role of being Gadget Man, whose sexuality was never relevant in the first place. So there's no way of showcasing it seriously without it being obtrusive.
Having problems keeping it up, Q?
And no way of presenting it comedically without being offensive.
Balls, Q?
Hence why most of the time, before the age of Pandas, it was used comedically.
This case seems quite attractive. For a lady.
If you're going to make Q gay, make him gay. Give him a Daniel Craig man crush as big as mine. Have him make Bond unnecessarily take his shirt off whenever he needs to inject smart blood or something. But whatever you do, do something with it or I'll call you out for what you're actually doing. Banding.
The Me Too movement and stuff, they were trying to answer to all these things because they didn't want to upset people because they're like, well, we're still making this franchise.
They should be shameless. Like, if they thought in the long term, they would be shameless. They'd be like, hey, look, this is James Bond. This is male fantasy. We sell male fantasy. Instead, they try to cater to everybody, and that's where they fail. You try to cater to everybody, and you're not going to please anybody. And
that's
you make
where
a bad
I would put
movie.
it under the Moonraker threshold right there, is just because, like, that's where the similarity really, really lies, is like, oh, we're chasing trends.
The only thing I'll fight back with you on is that I agree with you. It's like, we've moved up to below Moonraker, which I agree.
Yeah.
But then I look at Diamonds Are Forever, and I just go, Diamonds Are Forever confidently knows what it is and is enjoyable and has a really enjoyable bad guy and is a lot of fun. Like, if you have fun factor, it's going to be Diamonds Are Forever. It's low on the list because it is shamelessly ridiculous and a comedy movie. And then I look at Die Another Day, which has a foot in serious and a foot in goofy. And this movie kind of does too. I could almost see putting it right in between them.
Right. The only thing I'd fight, again, I'm going to fight back below Moonraker. And I think the reason for me for Moonraker is just, even though Moonraker is the movie that just jumps the shark, where it's like, we're going to go to space, we're going to do all this stuff. We've laid out about how Drago's plan in that movie is pretty solid. Like, it is like, okay, I get why you're doing what you're doing. It makes sense. I like all of that stuff leading up to it. I like Jaws' babyface turn, essentially, when he becomes a good guy and all that stuff. And that one's just fun overall, right? But it still plays really heavy into the comedy stuff.
I'm not going to argue about it being above Moonraker.
Right. But then when you're talking about Diamonds Are Forever, I go back to kind of the argument I would make with Skyfall and License to Kill, where it's like, one's a little bit of a classier movie than the other. It's mostly a movie that's a little bit classier than Diamonds Are Forever, and that's why I would go it over Diamonds Are Forever. Daniel Craig having a little too much say in this movie, and I think him handing the reins to someone who's more of a comedy writer to try to write this and do a punch-up of it for the comedy, you're just adding a spice to the mixture that maybe you didn't need to add. And another director or writer would have been like, yeah, I can add some levity, but I'm not gonna break character. And that's the thing, is like, there are times when he stays true to what I think is Bond, and then he goes back to something else. But I also don't know if that's like, they had takes where he was true to what he was in the script or the original script without the rewrites on there. So that's what I'm always confused about looking into this movie, because it does just feel like someone got their hands on the keyboard. I agree with it on that 100%. But I do think when it comes down to the story, emotional stuff, for me, that's where I'm like, I'm comparing a very emotional movie that like really compromises me every time you watch it to a movie that ends with two weirdos trying to kill people on a boat. You know, like, I'm like, come on.
They never would have done it, but how brilliant would have been if it was just old man Bond on Jamaica in his retirement and just like maybe remake Dr. No in a way, and just like literally everything. Better. Imagine like what's the famous Clint Eastwood movie? Get Off My Lawn. What's the
Gran Turismo?
Gran Torino.
Torino.
And
Sorry,
it's
not
just
Turismo.
and it's just Gran Torino on Jamaica, and it's just like old man Bond, and like maybe he dies in the end, like a straight up remake of Dr. No, but in this universe as the final installment of this series, as opposed to the first of the original series. Gran Torino and what's the Wolverine movie? Logan. And just like something that's just kind of small and intimate. You got Bond retired in Jamaica with his girl Madeline. You know, they're doing the simple life thing. He likes to fish. She likes to dive for shells like Honey Rider. Madeline goes off to some weird island one day and never comes back, setting Bond on one final mission to investigate this island. And it's just Dr. No the book verbatim from there on out. Guano, a torture obstacle course, and a fight with a giant squid, you know? Small and intimate. That would have been cool, but instead it's like, no, it can't be that. It has to be a globe-trotting, world-ending stakes, like everything big type of thing. This movie is like kind of all over the place. Die Another Day is kind of all over the place. You Only Live Twice is a letdown, and Spectre is a piece of shit.
Yeah.
You know, so where are you at? Are you still like Diamonds Are Forever versus
I still think it's slightly better than Diamonds Are Forever.
Based on the emotionality, based on the seriousness?
Emotionality, and I mean, I'll throw in like weak arguments, but I think emotionality, I think the even the cinematography, even the action sequences, there's just a lot more going on that I'm like, it pulls me in a little bit more as far as an enjoyable watch than Diamonds Are Forever. I like Diamonds Are Forever. It's a fine film.
But even something like, let me give you something like Blofeld. Remember Blofeld in Diamonds Are Forever, though.
No, I know. I like the Blofeld, but let me say this also. You're looking at a Sean Connery who's just paid $1 million and looks like shit playing Bond versus a James Bond who still looks good, looks better than me at my age. And I think he's even older than Sean Connery at that point. And I'm just like, damn, like that to me is like a little bit better than like big fat Connery being like, hey, what's going on? I'm going to like pick up all these chicks. And then you got Daniel Craig who probably actually would, if you would swap those two, like swap Craig and Connery.
I find this kind of interesting. Let me tell you why I find this interesting, because I came into this ready to compare You Only Live Twice and No Time to Die for obvious reasons, because they come from the same source material. They're both the final movie of their respective Bonds. Exactly, sort of, because Diamonds Are Forever is the actual final Connery movie because of his return. Yeah. So to say, no, it's not between Yolt and No Time to Die. It's between Diamonds Are Forever and No Time to Die. That's an interesting comparison as comparing to final Sendoffs.
Think about that for a second. Think about that. Because we go back to Diamonds Are Forever, and they knew that he wasn't coming back after Diamonds Are Forever. They were just like, here's $1 million. We just want you back because we want to make money off this franchise. That's all it was.
Yep.
That's literally all it was. And he's like, sure, I'll come back. Give me a picture deal and $1 million and I'll do it. That's it. I'm not going back after that. That's it. And then that's his last movie. Like, that's Connery's last movie, is a goofy, almost a parody of the Bond franchise. On the other hand, you've got Craig, whose last movie is a legitimate send-off. Like, I know we have people who hate the fact that he dies. You. It's well earned in this film, at least, and I think it works really well. Brings me to tears. I'm just like, God damn it. Like, why does that work so well? I don't know, but it's great. Just judging on that, it's like, oh, this is the best send-off for any of the Bonds. So I'm like, in that respects, I'm like, I kind of see where the edge is on this movie over Diamonds.
Judging this based on a send-off doesn't really work for me, though, because the reality of send-offs is that you can't do them if you're like Eon and you just want the show to go on forever. That's why the end of every movie is Bond getting laid, because it's a celebration of his victory. Champagne and pussy galore, and then on to the next installment of the franchise. The only reason Craig got a unique send-off here was obviously because he has his own universe. so there could be an end. If you know that it's somebody's final turn at something, you have the opportunity to give them a proper send-off, but not if that thing is expected to continue forever as this franchise did for 20 films. That's why I said in the Die Another Day episode that while Eon is trying to figure out how to reboot the series with Bond 26, they should go back and cap off the original series with a send-off for James Bond as played by everyone from Connery to Brosnan, with Old Man Pierce. But otherwise, I don't think sex on a boat or in a pool or a shower or a beach house is such a bad send-off, except maybe Lazenby seeing his wife murdered in front of him, of course. Putting it above the James Bond comedy. Again, this movie fails to give me Bond vibes. It gives me conclusion to the Craig era vibes, of course.
Yeah.
But it doesn't give me James Bond movie vibes. But one could also make that argument about Diamonds Are Forever, where it's like, wait a second, this is a comedy? James Bond shouldn't be a comedy. So you could at least make the argument that, like, you could elevate it above the oddball of the Bond series, which is Diamonds Are Forever. You could at least put it above that for having the ability to move you to tears. Now, where I challenge you is, do we then take that seriousness and we elevate it above Moonraker, and then we elevate it above Live and Let Die for their poor execution, and maybe put it just below Living Daylights?
My problem with that, though, is that I think the things that you and I are addressing, though, what we have, like, you and I are completely agreeing. This movie is a mess when it comes to the script. I think those are the things that make it less than Moonraker. Because if you put it up next to Living Daylights, my first go-to is going to be like, it's a better ending than Living Daylights, because Living Daylights kind of ends on a, like, just like, who gives a shit?
But Living Daylights is busy being a Bond movie. All the shortcomings we always throw at it, it's still busy being a Bond movie. And just to cover off on that for the millionth time, Bond can be goofy or serious, and I don't care so long as it's consistent. Goofy doesn't always mean bad, and serious doesn't always mean good. GoldenEye is at the top because its tone is pitch perfect throughout. It's to be taken seriously, but also its goofier elements are fun without being stupid. Meanwhile, Spectre is super dark and serious most of the time, and that movie's at the very bottom. So while we tend to give a higher rank to the more meaningful films that are to be taken seriously, this movie is just too much of a Disney-fied mess to the point that its story may push it above the James Bond self-parody movie, but keep it below motherfucking Moonraker, which is well known to be one of the goofier Bond movies, but is still definitively Bond. You know, Bond is put on an assignment and he does his thing.
It's another silly comedy, but it works a little bit better.
Moonraker is still my all-time favorite Bond ending.
James.
I think it may be time to go home.
Take me around the world one more time.
Why not?
Just flying off into the ether while getting laid. And even though it's goofy, Roger Moore's James Bond behaves like James Bond. Like he has his little moment of sexism with Goodhead.
I'm looking for Dr. Goodhead.
You just found her.
A woman.
And then in one of the most subtle but super James Bond moments, he bangs the chick in Rio de Janeiro.
How do you kill 5 hours in Rio if you don't samba?
That subtle little moment of just, hey, how are we going to fill our time? Let's fill it with banging. That is pure James Bond. Just, hey, I might die tonight, so let's just bang for the next couple hours, because it.
Moonraker's villain is a little more clear, and you're like, I get who this guy is. He's maybe one note, but you can get him.
Safin is just like, I'm going to kill millions, if not billions of people, and you don't know why. At least with Moonraker, Hugo Drax has one of the best bad guy motivations ever because he's a eugenicist. Eugenics is wrong. It is wrong. But you can understand the logic behind eugenics. And so I think on that, for me at least, on that note alone, I'm just like, if only Safin had been like,
here, in the untainted cradle of the heavens, will be created a new super race, a race of perfect physical specimens.
Like he says at some point, he's like, I think the human race needs to evolve, but he didn't take that far enough. Whereas with Drax, his whole thing is like, yeah, we need to kill off the weak so that the strong can inherit the earth.
Sure. If Safin just said something like, we need to get rid of the people that cause all the problems in this world.
Yeah.
That's
Done.
that's clear
Done.
because that's his motivation. Like that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's all you needed. It's literally like, and that's what's frustrating with this movie is the more we talk about it, this movie just needed pieces of dialogue to clarify things. It didn't need more humor to fill in the holes.
Yes, I like animals. Bye.
Those are the things that also for me bog the movie down so low. But when it comes to like putting it between Moonraker and Diamonds Are Forever, I'm like, the things that make the movie work enough for you to give a shit, I'm like, still elevates it, I think, above Diamonds Are Forever.
Okay, so the emotionality of the story puts it above Diamonds Are Forever. Bad guy motivation keeps it below Moonraker. That works for me.
Yeah.
That I think is where I think that's where we can cap it.
And I think that's generally fair. Like, I really do. I'm like, yeah, I think above Diamonds Are Forever is a fair assessment of the movie.
McCurdy, after 17 years ranking all these movies, we finally have a final ranked list.
Oh my
as
God,
they
we
are
did
now.
It. Holy shit, we did it.
We did it, and we both survived the Nans for now.
Oh my God, dude.
Let me read the list. We're at GoldenEye, Casino Royale, Goldfinger, From Russia with Love, Skyfall, License to Kill, The Spy Who Loved Me, The Man with the Golden Gun, Dr. No, The World Is Not Enough, A View to a Kill, For Your Eyes Only, Under Majesty's Secret Service, Quantum of Solace, Thunderball, Tomorrow Never Dies, Octopussy, The Living Daylights, Live and Let Die, Moonraker, No Time to Die, Diamonds Are Forever, Die Another Day, You Only Live Twice, Spectre. And let me just point out, now that we have that beautiful sacred list in front of us, let me point out just how beautifully balanced that is. Like, let me read it again, actor-wise, okay? Brosnan, Craig, Connery, Craig, Dalton, Moore, Connery, Brosnan, Moore, Lazenby, Craig, Connery, Brosnan, Moore, Dalton, Moore, Craig, Connery, Brosnan, Craig. There's almost this beautiful symmetry to it.
You got Lazenby in the middle.
Lazenby in the middle, dead in the middle, and then take everybody else, and they're almost evenly distributed throughout.
Dalton's on one end, and he's on the other end as well.
Pierce has one at the top, one at the bottom, one middle high, one middle low. Connery has two at the top, two at the bottom, one middle high, one middle low. Moore doesn't have anything really high nor really low, but it's just tightly grouped towards the middle. Craig has two at the top, two at the bottom, one right in the middle. It's so evenly distributed throughout. It's like, damn, there's a beauty in the balance of the list as it manifested episode to episode. I just think it's gorgeous. That's why I think it's sacred.
It is sacred.
So let's take this one step further and calculate the ultimate James Bond actor ranking based off this list. If we take the position of each film on the list and add them up for each actor and divide them by the total amount of films in the franchise, divided by the total number of that actor's individual films, plus 007 apiece, gives us these final figures. Rearranging by golf rules gives us the definitive ranking of the James Bond actors. Tailing in 6th, the charming Bond, Sir Roger Moore. Number 5, the badass now dead Bond, Daniel Craig. Number 4, the brazen butt-chin Bond, George Lazenby. 3rd place, the classic, the classy, Sir Sean Connery. Runner-up, the smooth ASMR master himself, Pierce Brosnan. And the number 1 James Bond 007 of all time, the sentimental thespian, literally the literal literary Bond, Timothy Dalton. All right, McCurdy. Damn. What a long road, dude. But we did it, though. We ranked every Bond movie. It's too bad that everybody else had to die, though.
Yeah, man, that Nan spot. I don't know what we're going to do about that, man.
F it. Let's just...
Hey, we did it.
We did it. Another toast.
Another toast.
To us.
To us.
To us.
Yeah, to us. All right.
Yeah, to us. We did it.
It's so weird to look at that list. You've heard me before say, I mean, I think that list is sacred. Most people will rank, they'll go through a Bond ranking and they go from memory, right?
Right.
We didn't go from memory. We went one movie to the next, painstakingly ranking it in a list that grew over time. I don't think anybody on this planet can claim a better ranking than what you're seeing right here. these 25 films, this is the best there is. Anybody can come through and they throw ad hominems at you. Any of you out there, come at us with well thought out arguments as to how this isn't perfect. This is perfect. If you're going to come in the comments, I don't want to hear about I'm a white guy or whatever. I want to hear specifically the problem you have with this. Other than that, go f yourself. This is the best James Bond ranked list that has ever existed in the space-time continuum that we live in.
Yeah.
Unless somebody came from the future to f with this list, this is the best there's ever going to... Oh, what was that?
What is that? Is it the Nans? What is it? Hold on, let me see.
What's happening again? What the is going on? Oh my God, the Nans is back! Oh,
I feel weird. Oh, I haven't felt like this since college.
What is going on?
Be silent. You were warned. The unbelievable perfection of your list has jeopardized the entire universe. What you are feeling is the pain you have caused me. It runs deep. Share it with me. All of your friends have been made absent, and yet you persist. But your resistance is futile. Drop your cocks and grab your socks. I'm beaming you up to the Dolphumanoid homeworld. Time to boldly go, motherfuckers.
Wouldn't be able to take us. What do we do?
I don't know. We'll have to rank another franchise.
Hey yo, favorite podcast on YouTube. Just chilling with the dudes. Hey yo, hey yo, hey yo. It's Shawnee Wavos. Hey yo, this podcast can be an escape from reality. Like you rank every movie with mad accuracy. Through the webcam, see my boy Nans, McCurdy, and Charlie. Tune in, cause it's always so gnarly. They rank every James Bond, get through all 25. Like even the one where Daniel Craig dies. Government spies, but we kept it under the radar. Hollywood always on that shit with the feminist. Don't make me go Chucky Rants, taking a stance, but we're specialists. Movie critics that don't care what the reception is. We have our own opinions, edit the podcast like a perfectionist. Fuck the IMDb and the movie score, as long as you watched and saw something you enjoyed. Pop culture language like when you're making small talk. Shout out to SB, Nico, and other supporters. We just hoping that the channel grows. Hit the Regal Cinemas with Maria Menounos. But this is Shawnee Wavos, rocking the mic. Rank every film in your favorite franchise. The story and plot are summarized. Getting drunk with the guys like Chuck and Evan Williams, Woodford Reserve Bourbon with McCurdy and Nans. Hope it's not demonetized, trying to stack the cash. Subscribe, smash that like button if you don't mind. Don't make me go Pierce Brosnan, Tomorrow Never Dies. Not as good as GoldenEye, everything must be ranked and analyzed. Keep it moving, something new from the studio. Make as much money as the new Super Mario Bros. But we don't play it safe, we gotta get it off our chest. Family like Fast X, we're not politically correct. The groups on YouTube give you the scoop of what's next. Kick back, relax for the new episode of Ranked. Shawnee Wavo, Shawnee Waves. My boy Jake on the beat. Ranked.
Like it's corn on the cob, check in with me, and then you do your job, do your job.